I'm Andrew Hall, and this is Dead Hand Radio. My guest for this episode is Jeremy Meador. Did I pronounce that right, Jeremy?
It's Metter.
Meador? Okay, sorry
Hmm.
about that. He's a UFO investigator, filmmaker, historian, and longtime resident of Nevada. Jeremy's interest in the UFO topic started in 2003, and he's best known for his research and field investigations. Oh, he's best known for his research. Reading from a script and I got lost. Sorry. Anyway, he's best known for his research and field investigations of multiple UFO crashes in Nevada dating back to the 1950s. His work has been featured in magazines, newspaper articles, and he's made appearances on television, radio shows, and podcasts. And most notably, he was a guest on Coast to Coast AM with Art Bell. We're going to talk about that too. Um, since he started looking into the topic of the crashes, Jeremy has interviewed countless witnesses, traveled many parts of the country, and expanded his research into other strange phenomena. And he continues his relentless search for answers to this day. I learned about Jeremy and his work through Nevada MUFON, where he recently gave a presentation about his work and shared some of his findings about those crashes. We're going to be talking about all that and other fascinating cases of high strangeness in the Silver State. Welcome to Dead End Radio, Jeremy.
Hey, thanks for having me, Andrew.
Sorry, I kind of botched the intro there, man.
Oh, it's
I,
fine.
I usually do a much better job on that. I apologize, but I'm really interested to hear more about. We can cover a little bit of ground of what you talked about the other day with
Hmm.
MUFON, but there's a lot more to your research and your investigations, and I'd really like to hit some of the high points to
Hmm.
get people a lot more familiar with you and the work that you do, and then we'll go back maybe and drill down on some of those keynotes.
Yeah, that'll
Um,
work.
cool. So before we get into your investigations, talk a little bit about why you got into what first got you interested in the topic of UFOs?
Well, kind of a different type of story. Back when I was about 11 years old, I was in the Boy Scouts, and we took a camping trip up to Mount Potosi. It's a mountain area outside of Las Vegas for your viewers that aren't familiar with the area. Um, it's kind of like an area that has like pine trees and there's like little streams and like kind of like a wooded area. Um, During this specific trip, it was actually like a trip for like they called it mom and me. It was like your mom and you. It's supposed to be like a bonding thing for like kids and their moms. Well, we went on this night hike, and on this night hike, me and my mom were in the back of this group. I'd say there was about, I think it was 30 people total were there. And the reason I know the numbers is because my mom was one of the ones that was running the event. So there was 30 of us, and me and my mom were in the very back, and a lot of the other scouts and their parents were a little bit ways down the trail. Well, when we were going down the trail, we saw what looked like the end of a boat sticking out of the woods, like almost like the bow of a boat. But what was weird was as we got close, it it did look like the bow of a boat, but it looked like it was on almost like a silver round object with this weird point coming out of the sides. The only way I could word it looked like an egg on stilts. And at that point in time, me and my mom kind of stopped with another kid and his mom, and we were staring at this thing for a long time. And then eventually we kind of kept on walking. And on the way back down the mountain, like going back towards camp, we saw the object was still there. Um, but that's not the weird part. The weird part is the next morning we went to go BB gun shooting down that same trail. So we went and walked back. I'd say the uh, the hike took place around 8 or 9 o'clock at night, and then it was probably like 7 or 8 in the morning the next morning when we had to go back towards that area. And that thing was gone. You could see three little areas where the stilts were, but the object was completely gone. And the older I get, I honestly believe that had to have been possibly a UFO, as weird as that sounds. I talk to my mom about it every once in a while, and she thinks the same thing. um, I'm not in touch with the other kid anymore, the one where him and his parents saw it. But I know last I talked to him when we were in high school, he said him and his mom have talked about it, and they thought it was the same thing we did. The only thing I could think of, I didn't think about it at the time that it was a UFO, but I mean nowadays I do.
That's amazing, man.
Yeah,
So, did you
that was in like 1998,
98? Okay.
1999, somewhere around there.
So did you experience any missing time or any of the related um, witness experiences that go along with a sometimes go along with a UFO sighting?
Well, not that I know of, but something that was really interesting was we walked a couple miles down this trail to almost like a planetarium outdoor amphitheater type area. And while we were there, the leader, I call it the Cub Scout leader, he was pointing out different stars out in the sky, like the North Star and all these constellations. And in the middle of us talking about one of the constellations, I remember he was talking about Venus, and while he was talking about Venus, Venus literally looked like it burned out. And I remember my mom cracked a joke about it at the time that Venus had burned out while he was talking about it. And I don't know if it was that object, but I thought that's the older I get, that's a really weird coincidence that we saw the whatever star we were looking at literally burned out. As I don't think it was a star now that I'm older, but I don't know if it was that object, but it was strange that this good timing.
That's wild. So how was that the only? And I don't say that lightly. Believe me, I that's a fascinating experience. But was there anything after that that you had experienced, or was that it?
As far as that specific object, that's the majority of the story for that thing. I think it was weird too because, like I said, there was only 30 of us on the mountain, and there was no reason for that to be there. Even if it was a boat or if it was something that people made or people had put there, you have to go through a couple checkpoints with the scouts to get out there. And if my mom was one of the main ones that was running this event, there's no way that my mom would have no idea what that thing was.
You know what? I know exactly where you're talking about because
Hmm.
I was out at Mount Potosi, oh, maybe 3 or 4 months ago, just
Hmm.
exploring out there off roading, and we
Yeah.
drove right past that camp, that Boy Scout camp
Yeah,
area.
there's like a one trail goes up the mountain and one goes down the mountain. If you go down, it goes to where the archery range and all that is, which is where we saw the object. And if you go up to the higher trail, it goes to the amphitheater area.
Right. The campground was closed down when I drove through there, so I just drove
Hmm.
all the way. If you continue on that road, it goes out into where the road ends, and you
Yeah.
can continue going out into basically the wilderness, mountain
Oh yeah,
ranges.
yeah.
And that's where I was, and I was actually out there during the
The Kettle
daytime.
Lombard crashes out there too somewhere. I've never been there, but it's like out there somewhere.
That's right. Yeah, you're right. Okay. Um, and you know what? That's something else that we could talk about, but we'll probably do that another time.
Okay, that's fine.
Because that's part of history, and I'm a big history fan. Well,
Yeah.
as you are as well. So, uh, how long after that did you actually start investigating and doing research into the topic?
Um, I would say that happened around the time I was 11 or 12. I started the group with my brother, our paranormal group, where we look for ghosts and all that kind of stuff. We started that in 2003, but we didn't really start going out and like investigating things until probably about 3 or 4 years later, I'd say. So probably about 2015, 2016 is when we started going out.
Okay, so and that group is Bigfoot's Pad.
Yep.
Do you want to talk a little bit about the group and what you guys do right now?
Yeah, I'll talk a
Because
little bit
that's
about it. We're not really your average paranormal group. There's three of us in our group. It's me, my brother, and our best friend. Um, we do ghost hunting, but we try to separate ourselves from just the ghost hunting because we'll do creatures, like we do a lot of Bigfoot stuff. The UFO crashes, that's kind of my own thing. Like they'll help me with it, but the Ely thing's kind of my side project. But we do all kinds of things. We're into mysteries, anything like that. We do ghost hunting, but we try to separate ourselves and kind of do other things as well.
okay. So talk a little bit about the UFO crashes. How did you learn about them, and what did you do once you learned about them?
Well, I used to do a podcast a long time ago, like probably about like 10, 15 years ago. I used to do a podcast. And during the podcast, I actually had found out about the Ely UFO crash. Somebody said that a UFO had crashed in the 1950s up in Ely. I looked it up, and there was really nothing out there on the internet about it. So my grandmother, by pure chance, started being a school teacher out in Eureka, Nevada. And she said some of her coworkers knew the basic story, and they knew certain people that she could get me in touch with that had stories about the UFO crashing. Um, I believe my grandmother living out there was kind of my in, because the locals out there don't like talking to really the big time media, and they don't like talking to like if Channel 5 in Las Vegas were to come out there, they probably wouldn't want to talk to them. But if somebody's more small time, like a smaller person, if they decided to get involved in this, they're more likely to talk to them. I made friends with the right people. My friend Steve is a radio DJ out there for KDSS Radio. I was on his show a few times. I was in the Ely Times newspaper, and one thing led to another, and I ended up getting lots of witnesses started coming forward. I know other researchers didn't have very much luck in the past trying to find witnesses, but I just happened to meet the right people and got lucky, and then I met the right witnesses at the right time.
Very cool. So it sounds like you learned about the crash, and then you got involved with the radio, and people started reaching out to you
Yeah.
to talk to you more about it. That's
And
very
then it kind
cool.
of branched out from originally I was only looking for the 1950s incident that you see on the internet. And then it kind of branched out to now I get calls all the time about different things out there, like lights chasing cars, or if somebody thinks there was a UFO crash anytime in the past in northern Nevada in general, usually I get phone calls about that. Um, I mean, I'm grateful for it, of course. I'd rather be the contact person for a lot of that stuff than not find out about it at all.
Definitely.
Even if
Y
some of them aren't didn't happen or some of them did, whatever you want to believe, I think it's more interesting to know about the stories than not know about them.
the interesting thing is that people are looking for some kind of affirmation, I think. And
Hmm.
by talking to somebody who's actually an experiencer and also researching and investigating these topics, that
Hmm.
gives them that kind of affirmation. Now, I got a couple things I got to mention. My neighbor's dogs are going crazy right now, so there's probably going to be some background noise. I apologize for that. And we've got a couple people watching the live stream.
Hmm.
Rodrigo is one of them, and he just I'll just put it up here. He said, "Hello and welcome to the live stream, Rodrigo. Thanks for being here, man." If
Great.
anybody has any questions for Jeremy while we're talking, go ahead and put them out there. I'll try
Hmm.
to get to them, and if I don't, then just yell them at me again. Okay, we'll try to get to all of them. uh, Now, we'll get back to the UFO crashes because there's a lot more that um, about you besides
Hmm.
researching and investigating those UFO crashes. And one of those things is that as a result of those UFO crashes, you had some unnerving, I guess you could say, experiences with potentially the Men in Black.
Yes. I personally had two or three different run-ins, but I know of about five or six people that had run-ins also that were witnesses that had talked to me. Um, the most interesting one, I was on the Art Bell show and I was talking about the Ely UFO crash. I had just found out that there was a second crash site out in where a UFO had ran into that crashed and hit some train tracks. And as part of that, I started describing in detail about what some of the witnesses had told me and about like the debris field and possible hard evidence. And the very next day, I came home from work after working the graveyard shift, and I had just pulled in the driveway. My legs were sticking out of the car. I was getting ready to get up to get out of the car, and a white, I guess they call it a white sedan, pulled behind me, almost like a T-bone shape, as if like trying to block you in the driveway. And I guess kind of like this would be me. They kind of blocked me in the driveway, and when I got out of the car, I went around the driver's side of my car, went around the hood and down the passenger side, and then I kind of walked around the back of his car. And when I was walking around the back of his car, I saw his license plate said U.S. government official use only on the license plate. So it was a state or a government car of some kind. I don't know who it would belong to, but the guy that got out was wearing a military fatigue. Like he was on duty or was acting like he was on duty. And he started asking me all about this physical evidence that I had described on the Art Bell show. And he started asking me about where the crash site was and who I had talked to or who had told me. Um, Something I didn't mention on the MUFON meeting that I went to the other day. Um, there was a woman. Her name was, I just call her Mrs. Thompson. She lived over in East Ely. And me and my friend Nick, who does the Bigfoot's Pad stuff with us, we were supposed to go up to Ely on a Friday or a Saturday at that point. I think it was a Friday. And we were going to interview her because her husband had been one of the miners that had seen this UFO crash. We got a call around Monday or Tuesday from the same lady thanking me for doing this interview with her, and I had not done this interview because, like I said, we were still in Las Vegas, and she was telling me, "Oh well, Jeremy and Nick, you guys just left my house. You were in a." She said we were in a black SUV, and she said, "Yeah, they asked all about the UFO crash, and she said um, they talked about my college at the time. They talked about some of my professors. They had talked about my work. But what was weird about the whole thing was when I was first started doing this UFO crash, I contacted Hill Air Force Base and spoke to a historian about a research project I was doing, which is what my code name for the UFO thing I was looking into at that point in time. And in order to get the information, I had to prove to them I was doing a research project, and I had to tell them like a little bit about my background. And the background I gave them was the same information they gave this woman when they claimed they were me and our friend Nick, and they interviewed her.
So they did some background on you before they went and talked to her, and
Yeah,
then
and
they
it scared
posed
that
as
woman
you.
so bad. I still to this day haven't talked to her a day ever since, and she still never told me her story. So it
Oh
scared her
wow.
pretty bad. I don't know who they were, but I think it had obviously had something to do with that call to Hill Air Force Base.
Yeah, we'll definitely get into that
Yeah.
some more. But so it's interesting how all these experiences are
Hmm.
intertwined. Now, again, I'm just hitting the high notes so that we could
Hmm.
give people an overview of what you're all
Hmm.
about and what you research, and then we'll go back and we'll drill down on some of these.
Okay.
Um, so, besides the UFO topic, you're also a paranormal investigator, and you look into other cryptids and high strangeness, right?
Yes.
Does that also include ghost hunting, by the way?
We do ghost hunting, but we don't really advertise the ghost hunting as much because so many people do the ghost hunting that the big things that we do, our claim to fame is the UFOs in northern Nevada and the something called the Nevada Sand Yeti is our other
That's
really popular one.
fascinating, man. Yeah, I have to hear more about that one. So let's come back to the Sand Yeti, okay? We'll talk
Okay.
about the cryptids in a minute because there's another interesting uh, area of research that you've been involved in, and that's
Hmm.
the tunnels in southern Nevada.
Yes.
Now, how did you find out about these tunnels, and what are they?
So back in the early 2000s, this is actually right around the time we started actually going out to investigate ghosts and things like that. Um, I would say I was in my late teens at the time, early 20s. And I had gotten a message on a forum, actually, if that tells you how old that was. It was a message board, like a forum. And I got a message from a guy. I think we were talking about Area 51 at that point in time. There was a guy who was telling me that he had worked for a tunnel company, like a tunneling company or a boring company, from 1982 to 1984, and he says if you're leaving Las Vegas, you drive past. If I don't know if you guys know where Mountain Pass is, which is kind of ironic. It's right where Mount Potosi is in Mountain Pass. Right when you go out of Mountain Pass, there's kind of a little desert area before you go to Pahrump. I forget what the name of the freeway is. I can't believe I can't remember that.
I don't know it either, but I know where you're talking
Yeah,
about.
so there's a freeway that runs from Las Vegas to Pahrump, Nevada. So he told me that if you go through Mountain Pass, right when you go through Mountain Pass, when you first go into the little desert area, you start coming down the mountain. There's a group of tunnels that he was in charge of. He was one of the workers building these tunnels, and at that point in time, he said that he was told that these tunnels were going to go from basically Mountain Pass out to Area 51, and these were supposed to haul the workers that were living in Las Vegas. I guess if they don't want to take the Janet flights or if they don't take a bus, they were going to take this train out there. And he says his boss was telling him at one point in time that they wanted to link similar tunnels that were already built or were in the process of being built around the country together. So if they had an emergency or if some important person needed to get from, like, say, Las Vegas to Florida, if there was a tunnel that existed, they could take this train over there. Um, the thing that I thought was interesting is he said that there were going to be maglev trains or magnetic levitating trains like the ones you see over in parts of Asia, and they have them in Europe. They're like very high speed trains that use magnets uh, to get to pick up these high speeds. But from the research I did, there was a company called the Rand Corporation, RAND. The Rand Corporation, they were popular in the 1970s and early 80s for coming out with a series of papers and interviews with the Los Angeles newspapers and with like San Diego newspapers. And they were saying they had an idea of building similar trains, but they weren't building them for the government. They wanted to build them for almost like a subway around Southern California. Um, but I guess they put out three major papers. And in 1982, I believe it was, when the third paper came out, they said that the US government had showed interest in the project and that they actually wanted to fund it. So I don't know if they actually went through with it or not. Um, Salter was the name of the guy, Salter, Salter. That's the name of the guy that was writing these articles for the Rand Corporation. I don't know if Rand actually went through with it, but the company that the guy who was talking to me was working for, I'll have to find the name. It was like Rothinger, a name I've never heard of before. But after he told me his original story, I was kind of skeptical. So I asked him, I was like, well, can you send me some pictures or can you tell me a little more about it? He got into a lot of details about where this is, and he sent me some pictures. It looked like, from the pictures he sent me, it looked like the entrance to this train tunnel was not down in the valley. For those of your listeners who know the Pahrump area, it looked like it had to have been, if you're coming down from Mountain Pass, from like higher elevation to lower elevation. There was like a guardhouse or a guard shack. There were tall fences with razor wire, about 2 or 3 buildings, but they were all blended in with the desert, if that makes sense, like the paint scheme and everything, almost like they wanted to camouflage it. But I didn't see any pictures of the actual tunnels, but he did send me pictures of the stairs that go down into the tunnels. So I believe it's out there. I haven't personally gone out to look for it. I plan on doing it. I've kind of forgot all about it until a couple of years ago. Um, so it's got to be close enough to Vegas, in my opinion, to where the workers could drive there in the mid to late 80s. The workers in Vegas could drive there, but it had to be outside of town far enough to where normal people who were out in the desert couldn't find it.
Yeah, I know exactly where you're talking about, and I've driven through there quite a few times. I've never seen anything
Mhm.
like what you're talking about. But when you're driving through there at 60 or 70 miles an hour,
Mhm.
you can't really, spend a lot of time looking off the side of the road.
Well,
It is all desert out there, huh?
the only place I could think of is Tacopa Road is out there. It goes off to your left to go to Tacopa Ghost Town. I'm thinking Tacopa Road's out there, but there's another road that goes left before Tacopa, but I can't recall the name of it. I'm thinking it might be
Okay.
that road is what I'm thinking.
So you're thinking that it's off to the southern side of that freeway.
It's got to be either on the backside of Mount Potosi, like almost like you're going to Sandy Valley, or it's got to be on the mountain pass side where the little town is, right when you come down, is what I think. But if it was so really close to Mountain Pass, the people that live there would all know where it is.
True.
So, unless some of them do know where it is. But in general, it's got to be at least a little ways from the town.
I mean, it would be worth a drive out there because
Yeah,
it's only like an hour away from me.
I've talked
Uh,
to some people in Blue Diamond for Sand Yeti things, like people that have called us out for Sand Yeti sightings.
yeah,
And I've asked some of them about it, and some of those people did actually know about the train tunnels.
interesting.
But there's only three people at that point in time that were original people that lived in. I'm trying to think how to word it. Not settlers, original residents of Blue Diamond. There was only three of them that were original at that point, and all three of them said that they had people that were building the tunnels coming through there to get gas and things in the early '80s.
It would seem like an operation like that would uh, spur kind of a little bit of a boon to that
Mhm.
local economy. And Blue Diamond, nobody really knows why Blue Diamond was ever built. Why was Blue Diamond ever established as a town?
Well, some people say that they think it was because of the one of the mines in the area, but I haven't. I'm not too familiar with the history of Blue Diamond. I just know that they claim that it was originally built for one of the mines out there.
There is a mine if you go out Mount Potosi, that road out there,
Hmm.
or Potosi. How I'm not sure how you pronounce the name, but there is a mine out there. There's a little memorial of that mine, and it's
Hmm.
gone in and out of use over the years. I think it
Yeah.
originally started out as a lead mine or something. They were mining like lead down in there.
Hmm.
So it was. I don't think there was any precious metals in that particular mine, but it did go in and out of use several
Yeah.
times. So that could be the mine that you're talking about. Um, so is there anything else about those tunnels that you would like to mention? So you think they
Well,
go from like east, or that would be western Las Vegas or Henderson area, all the way up to Area
that would have
51?
to be a long tunnel if you think about it. But
Sure.
the guy was fairly certain, and he seemed like he knew his stuff. Like I believe him that he worked on the tunnels, but he said he didn't work there anymore when they finished the tunnel. He said that some of his old coworkers said they did finish the tunnel.
Hmm.
If they actually really did that, that makes me wonder if they were to use the tunnels nowadays, or did they maybe use it for a little while and nowadays they don't use it. I'm not sure exactly.
Seems like that would be a lot more secretive than putting people on the Janet Airlines to send them out there, because everybody knows about the
Mhm.
Janet Airlines now.
Yeah, and he was my other question. I forgot to ask him because now it says his email is no good when I try to contact him. But my question is, how did they get tunneling equipment out there without anyone seeing it? Or wouldn't it make some kind of noise or kick up dust or something? You would think if they're doing all that, or there would be at least some kind of waste product they would be hauling out of the side of the mountain, like to
I have
to
no
do
idea.
these tunnels.
Those are good questions, and I can't even speculate on
I
what
almost
they would
think if
do
you
with
were
it.
to find the tunnels, if they were to dump the piles of dirt nearby, that might be a way to find out where the tunnels are.
That's true. Any
Unless they
any
purposely brought the
artificial
dirt far away.
artificial mountains that have sprung up out there. Um, one potential way to look into this. Have you ever heard of the Boring Company that Elon
Yes.
Musk started? Okay.
Mhm.
That sounds like it would be like an earlier version of what Elon Musk is doing now. So
Because I
if
know
you
they
could
have
look at,
those tunneling machines nowadays that they have like a big drill on the front or whatever you want to call it, like an auger, and it'll drill the hole for the tunnel, and then it uses the dirt or material that comes out of the tunnel, and it uses it to um, almost like makes its own like concrete or plaster to seal the sides. Have you seen those?
You know what? I haven't looked into it very
But they're
much.
gigantic. They're like the
Yeah.
size of a house. And I was like, I don't know how you would get something like that if something like that existed back then. Um, According to the articles that Salter wrote, he says the Rand Corporation said as early as 1972 they were confident that they could build a tunnel from San Diego to the middle of the country at that point in time. So I'm like, so I'm pretty sure in the 80s, if Salter was that confident to be the spokesperson for this company doing all these newspaper interviews, I'm like, I'm pretty sure this other company would have used something similar, in my opinion.
There's a lot of speculation that the entire United States is connected underground through tunnels like that. Military
Hmm.
installations throughout the United States are connected. It, it's a big myth, but there may be something to it.
Oh yeah.
It'd be
I believe
interesting.
personally that the tunnels were built, and I think that they do exist. But as far as were they completed and were they actually used, that I'm not 100% sure.
Are
But
you
it sounds like if they were to invest all that money and all that time, that you would think that they would finish it.
definitely? Yeah. I mean, it would seem logical to me that they would do something like that if they wanted to keep their operations top secret, underground. Are you familiar with the FOIA process? Freedom
That
of
I'm not really
Information
sure.
Act?
Oh
Freedom
yeah,
of
yeah,
Inf-
that I am.
okay. So I wonder if there's a way to, and I don't even know who you would submit that to, which organization you would submit it to find out if they did build any of those tunnels.
Hmm.
But that would be something to look into. Um, so let's talk a little bit about this Sand Yeti. And
Hmm.
neighbors' dogs are going crazy again. Apologize for that. Um, how did you hear about the Sand Yeti, and can you describe what they look like?
Yeah, I can. The Sand Yeti we happened to come across by pure chance. We were looking for UFO stories out in a Blue Diamond area, and we started getting a message from a couple of people saying at that point in time that there was some kind of a creature resembling a Bigfoot. They called it a hairy man or a wild man, and they said that it came out of the canyons and out of the Red Rock area. Those like the I don't know if your viewers are familiar, but if you go back in Red Rock a little ways, there actually are some pretty good mountain ranges with trees and things back there. It's not like all desert all over. Um, they were saying that this creature would come around and it would tear this guy's bushes up, and it would like eat bird seed that he had out in the front yard. And another woman said that it went into I guess she had some clothes out in a tool shed, and it tore her clothes to shreds and threw them all over the yard and out in the road and everything. Um, Most of the stories came from Arroyo Road, which is, if you know of the little town of Blue Diamond in Red Rock Canyon, it's the one of the last roads you see before you go out of Blue Diamond. There's not really a whole lot of houses on Arroyo Road. Um, So this creature would come out at night, and they said it would like look in people's windows. They said it tore that guy's bushes apart. It tore that woman's shed apart. And we actually went out there and started interviewing the witnesses in person. And then once we started interviewing them in person, we put out an ad in a couple of different newspapers, and we started getting people coming forward from other areas talking about it. We have stories from Caliente, Nevada. We have got stories from people that live over in Lee Canyon. Um, there's lots of stories out in Mount Charleston. And believe it or not, back in the 1980s, the earliest story I know of is from 1980. A guy that was working out at the Nevada test site saw one of these creatures crossing the road. He said that it looked like it was coming from one of the mountain ranges out into the open desert, almost as if it was traveling from one mountain range to the other. But in order to get through it, you had to go through this desert area. So, in my opinion, whatever it is, it must use the desert areas to cross. I don't think it necessarily lives in the desert, but I think it definitely uses the desert as to travel from one wooded area to another. Um, there's some of the more interesting stories. Um,
Wait, before you get to the stories, can you describe what it looks like?
yes, most people say that it's brownish in color. They say there's hair all over the whole entire body, besides its hands and its face. Some people say that there's a smell to it, or like a stink, and it seems like it hasn't chased any cars or it hasn't chased any people that I know of. But I do know stories about it trying to get into people's houses, or stories about it looking in people's windows, like it's curious about people. Um,
How tall?
so, so I do have stories up from Lee Canyon where the creature actually chases people. I don't know if you'd say chase, where it kind of warns people. There was a group of hikers. There was five guys and one woman over in 2016. They were out on it's desert. I want to say Desert Wash Road. It's right by the. There's like a youth camp up there. There's like a turnoff that goes to a youth camp, and it's one of the one or two turnoffs after that. It goes off into a remote area of Mount Charleston and
Okay.
Kyle Canyon. Well, anyway, so these people were hiking. It was they're in their early 20s, or I think it was their early 20s or early 30s. And my brother actually collected this report. They were hiking in these caves, checking out all these caves that are out there, and they said this creature came out of one of the caves, not the one of the ones they were looking in, but like I would say maybe like a fourth of a mile down the way, but close enough to startle them. And it came out of the cave and it was watching them, like almost like following them at a distance, I guess you would say. And it would occasionally throw rocks at them. And they said that they kind of played it off as someone was playing a prank on them. And then the creature actually started making grunting noises, and it started making almost like vocalizations, and it scared them. And it said that they started walking fast back to their car because this thing was scaring them. And they said the creature was following them at a distance all the way until they got out of the tree line and got to the desert area where they parked their cars. And that wasn't even 3 4 years ago, was when that happened. um, One of the craziest stories, I'll tell you two quick things, because we are filming a documentary about this. We're in like the post-production phase. uh, Last March, I spent a month-long trip with my brother and our best friend going up to Mount Charleston 3 or 4 days a week. And we would stay out there from about 10 at night till about 3 or 4 in the morning. Well, um, on this specific night, I guess I would start with this one. There was a really heavy snowstorm that went through, and we got all this on camera. A really heavy snowstorm came through, and we were on the backside of Mount Charleston, kind of like by Lee Canyon. Um, and the only way I could word it is there's high ground, which is where the road is, but if you walk, it goes really far down to where there's like a I don't know if it's a man-made water source. It's like a little spring or like a pond. And we were walking in snow that was up to our waist because it was really heavy snow. And it was our idea was if we go down by this pond, since nobody's been up here, maybe we'll find something down by this pond. Well, when we got to the very bottom of this, the very bottom of this, I don't know if you call it a trail or the trail we were making, I guess is more like it because it wasn't like a formal trail. We get down to the very bottom by this pond, and there's a three-toed footprint, um, about double or triple the size of my foot and any of my brother's foot or our friend. And it's a single three-toed footprint that was perfectly preserved in ice, almost like it had snowed. But that's based. I don't know if you guys know. Sometimes the snow turns into ice in certain conditions. There was one footprint that was ice, and there was two or three footprints that were partial footprints, but they look like parts of those had been messed up from whether the creature was walking or maybe wind messed it up. But it was going towards that pond. So we were on our way back after we documented this, and on our way back, we heard what sounded like a dragging sound up a little ways up the trail, and we kind of all stopped and froze. And the noise, you could hear something dragging, and it kind of stopped. Well, about 30 to 45 minutes later, we got to where the car was parked, and we decided to turn on our thermal camera, and at this point it was pouring snow, like almost like a whiteout condition. You can't see anything, and when you look around, we could see what looked like the shape of a human figure off in the distance walking away from us. And I started calling out to my brother and our friend, saying that I was something was up there with us. It wasn't even half a mile away, not even, whatever it was. And I know that wasn't a person for a fact because it was snowing so heavily. We were up there all night long, and you could hear cars for miles if a car was going to come by. We didn't hear any cars. It's not the tourist area, Mount Charleston. It was pouring snow. Um, I don't know what it would be. If it was a person, there was no other cars anywhere nearby. We didn't see any on the way there or on the way back, and no one was parked where we were parked. Um,
So
Whatever it was,
can
though,
I?
we caught something on two legs walking in this snowstorm, and it was walking away from us.
Did you? And I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I just want to get a couple questions in. Um, the footprint that you found, did you
Hmm.
take any photos of it or try to get a cast of
Yes,
it?
we actually we documented that. We documented the thermal footage. We actually followed it for a good, I'd say 2-3 minutes. We followed it. We showed the footage to the BFRO, the Bigfoot Research Organization. The BFRO, they were really interested, and they couldn't figure out what it was either.
Uh,
But
I don't want to get too controversial, but since you mentioned it, the BFRO, they do have a little bit of a reputation of concealment. Like
mhm,
they have there's a lot of detractors that are not really comfortable with the BFRO
mhm.
because of their methods of concealing information and turning
Yeah.
witness testimony into something that it isn't. Did you have any kind of experience like that when you were dealing with them?
Well, when we originally came out with the footage, they wanted us to sign a document saying that we didn't own our footage, and we refused to do that. And that's kind of when they stopped dealing with us.
Ah, okay,
But we
interesting.
are going to release the footage on our documentary. It should be about a month or two from now.
Awesome.
We got sidetracked a little bit, so we didn't work on it nonstop for a year. But all the footage is filmed. We just have to do a little bit of narration and a little bit more editing, and it'll be out. We're gonna. What we were thinking of doing was releasing it as a free documentary on YouTube, and then we're gonna do a part two, and that one we might charge like $1 or $2 to watch that one. But the
Cool.
first one we're gonna do, because it has some of the good footage and it introduces who we are. That one we're gonna release for free on YouTube.
That's awesome. Yeah, that'll be worth watching. Now, I don't want to give away all the reveals because you guys are going to release this as a documentary, which is cool, and I can't wait to see that. Um,
Hmm.
but the size of this creature, has it been reported to be like the same size as a human, bigger than a human? How big is it?
Um, from what we hear, most of them are about 6 feet tall. We've heard them as tall as 7 feet, but most of them are 6 foot tall. I would say the majority of the ones that you see around Las Vegas, most of our stories come from the Blue Diamond area, the Mountain Pass area. We hear a lot from Kyle Canyon and Lee Canyon. X1075 radio station in the early 2000s reported Boulder City actually was having a bunch of people see it down by the lakes out there.
Oh wow!
Um, Actually, the original story, the term Sand Yeti, came from them. A family was out at Lake Mojave or Lake Mead, Lake Mead, and they said that when they were pulling into a cove, they actually saw the creature was walking away really quickly. I'm not running, but like walking, power walking almost through a desert area almost to try to get away from them. And it looked like the creature had been down by the river, about down by the Colorado River, and was drinking or something. And I guess they had startled it, and it was running away. They're walking away, and they reported it to the radio station, and then the radio station started talking about it, and then that's when other witnesses started coming forward from the Boulder City area. Besides that test site article, that's probably the next big I guess you call it, big reveal of the Sand Yeti that I know of. And then it kind of died until recently, now that we're starting to talk about it.
The the mountain area seems legit. That I could totally see a big hairy creature living up in those mountains,
Hmm.
basically hidden away and not visible to most humans except on a rare occasion. The the sightings in near Blue Diamond, I could totally see
Hmm.
that because there is so much um, dense wooded area back behind to the west of that area. The
Hmm.
Boulder City seems. I'm not trying to be skeptical or
Yeah.
throw any doubt, but it seems really odd that the creatures would even venture that far if their habitat
Yeah.
their habitat is in the mountain areas. I wonder what the heck they were doing
Well, they
down
weren't
there.
they weren't seeing it in the town of Boulder City. They were seeing it down by the Lake Mead or the Colorado rivers where people were seeing it.
Okay, but even that, if it depending on the time of year, I guess, because if it was in the
Mhm.
summer, what the heck is a hairy creature doing in the middle of the desert?
Well, my thing is,
Doesn't make any
I
sense,
don't
but
think that it could live in the desert and not be seen by people. It would have to use the desert for traveling only, in my opinion, is the way I
yeah,
look at it. Unless it just got so unbearable up in the mountains, it had to go get some water or something. Is the only thing I could think of.
maybe it likes fish.
Could be.
I don't know.
Well,
Yeah, that
my
that just
our friend Nick went out by Frenchman Mountain one day, and he was going out taking some videos for our YouTube channel actually, and he happened to find some strange three-toed footprints out there after it had just rained. He found about 20 or 30 footprints going in a line, but Frenchman Mountain, there's no trees or anything, so I don't know where it would be coming to, and I don't know where it'd be going from in that. But he did catch footprints that were very similar to what we found in Mount Charleston when in the ice.
mhm. uh, that's compelling. I mean,
Hmm.
if you're finding evidence in two different places, then it supports the eyewitness testimony. Um, so, what's the name? Santa Maria 5248 asks, "What's the name of the documentary?"
What we're thinking about calling it is the Nevada Sand Yeti, a Bigfoot, and then putting a dash and writing a Bigfoot's Pad documentary is what we're thinking about calling it.
Cool.
And that should be out, like I said, probably definitely over the summertime for sure at the latest, but we're aiming for a month or two from now.
Okay, and that'll be available on your YouTube
Yep, it'll
channel
be on
with.
YouTube. We're not charging anything for that, just because the story is it is kind of a bizarre story, and some people are a little bit skeptical of it too. So we're thinking maybe if they watch it, they'll get interested in the topic.
Well, it's the first time I've heard of it. Actually, the
Yeah.
Sand Yeti. Once you and I first started talking, is the first time I've ever heard of. And I've always been curious, why doesn't Nevada have any cryptids other than
Mhm.
the really creepy, scary water babies, which I
Yeah.
still don't even understand what those really are. Have
Well,
you ever investigated those?
that I haven't. If you go to far northeastern Nevada, or if you go by Reno, there's quite a bit of Bigfoot and Sasquatch stories around those areas.
Oh,
Jarbidge, Nevada, actually has stories about the Native Americans in the 1800s calling it a man eater, and they're
well,
saying
that
that
was
that
that was
creature actually.
the redheaded giants, though, wasn't it?
That's in northwestern Nevada.
Oh, okay.
Northeastern Nevada is the Native Americans actually named it the man eater because they said that it used to catch people and eat them. I don't know for sure if it did that or not, but that's just what they called it.
I
Garbage, I
mean,
could see it living up there because it looks like you're in heavily forested area, like you're in Idaho or something. But I think the closest paved road, is 50 miles away, and only a couple hundred people live there. So I believe it could live there. But when you think of Southern Nevada, it's not a typical habitat that you would think of when you think of a Bigfoot.
although like you said, man, the Mount Charleston area and to the west, there's a whole mountain range up there between Las Vegas and Pahrump.
Yeah.
So I mean, that's a huge area, and if there's a lot of caves in there, anything could live in there.
Hmm.
Certainly plausible in my mind.
Well,
Uh,
and the other thing is, we do get quite a bit of stories from like the Caliente and Pioche area, from like northeastern Nevada. I think it's because not that many people live there, and there's a lot of outdoorsmen in that general area. So they seem to come across it occasionally, whether they're on a hunting trip or if they're fishing, because they have like a lot of little ponds and little lakes up there that don't really see very much traffic. Um, that's kind of where we're getting a lot of stories in the past 6 months. Would probably be from that general area.
how do the witnesses come forward and reach out to you guys?
Well, we have a website, bigfootspad.com. That has nothing to do with my UFO stuff. That's just our paranormal group. People write us on there. Or the other way they contact us is we get a whole bunch of messages on our Facebook.
Okay, cool.
And it's interesting because sometimes you'll kind of like go to work and then you go check your Facebook and there's someone talking about something, one of these sightings, and it kind of makes your day a little bit more interesting.
Definitely. Um, the and when you mentioned the sightings out in the Blue Diamond area, that's
Hmm.
real. Oh, I shouldn't say real close, but it's not too far from the area where you had your UFO sighting.
It's very close.
Yeah, and that really gave me like it made my ears perk up a little bit. Like
Hmm.
I've heard of potential connections between UFOs and the Bigfoot
Oh yeah.
creatures. Don't know what that connection is. I don't know if it's real, but there are
Hmm.
similarities, and there have been, at times where Bigfoot has been sighted. There's also been UFO sightings
Oh yeah, for
in many
sure.
cases.
We see I want to say it's Route 160. This is the one route I want to say, the one that goes through Red Rock or the one that goes through Mount Potosi. But either way, we have reports about several, probably like 10 or 12 of them, about the creature crossing the road at different times from the 1980s until now. Like I
That's
said, it's
incredible,
like
man.
it's most of the time it's in the middle of the night, and it's like a trucker or it's someone coming back from Pahrump or going to or from Pahrump, and they usually see it when there's like not a whole lot of traffic out in the middle of the night.
Yeah, and there's if they're crossing that road between Blue Diamond and whatever is going, there's a little mountain range to the south of
Hmm.
Blue Diamond. If they're crossing that road going into that area, I don't know. I think there's a mine in there in that area. Isn't there some old mining
Um,
area up in there?
Across the street from Blue Diamond,
Mhm.
like that general area, there's a gypsum mine out there.
Ah, okay, okay.
And they make
Forgot about that.
wallboard in one of the. There's like a refinery where they make wallboard for houses in that factory.
Right, right.
The only reason I know is I applied for a job there at one point. They didn't hire me, but that's how I know about it. Is like I applied to work there.
Yeah, well, maybe your future is in filmmaking, man. Hopefully, your
I'd like it to
documentary
be.
will. Yeah, yeah.
I'm really wanting to move to Ely in the next year.
Well, if that's where all your research is happening, then that would be a good place to stay.
Oh yeah.
Uh, so, all right, let's go. Let's dig into. Unless, do we have any more questions about the Sand Yeti? I think that's a cool name, man. Um,
Oh yeah.
it,
We
it
well,
describes perfectly what the creature is and where it lives.
the thing is with the documentary we're putting out, there really is. If you want to believe this creature exists, we have plenty of evidence to support that. We have thermal footage of the creature. We have a couple of footprints. We have a vocalization we taped. We have multiple eyewitnesses on there. It's going to be really, in my opinion, it's going to be basically the first of its kind for this type of, actually the only one I know of for a desert Bigfoot. And
Yeah,
I think we're going to have so much evidence. I think it's going to get at least some people out there looking for it, in my opinion.
that'd be cool. There's a new. Well, it's in its second season called Expedition Bigfoot TV
Yes.
series. I love that show. That to me is the best TV series on Bigfoot that I've seen.
Hmm.
I love that show. If you got the attention of those guys and they came out here and did an investigation, that would be awesome.
I was under film contract. I did some filming for it was the Discovery Network, so it was either History Channel, or it was Travel Channel. We were filming a UFO show. We did the pilot episode and everything, and I was under contract for the past year for that. So I haven't had any word back from them, but I haven't been able to do interviews for the past year. The MUFON interview I did the other day was the first one I was able to do since my contract ended.
That's awesome. Well, at least that's expired and you're able to talk about it again. But
Yeah,
the NDA for the film, was that, did that have to do with the UFOs or all of your work?
it was the Ely UFO stuff,
Okay.
specifically
So
that train incident.
we still have we could go for at least 30 more minutes and longer if we need to, but
Hmm.
why don't we spend the rest of the time and talk a little bit more about that Ely UFO crash and what were your findings?
Hmm.
Because I think your hypothesis is very
Intriguing.
compelling, huh?
Yeah, I said
It's
intriguing.
yeah, intriguing. It's very compelling. I
Mhm.
It makes a lot of sense. I mean, when you think about now, but before you get into your, um, talking about that,
Yeah.
the Kingman crash is something that I looked into a little while ago,
Hmm.
and I spoke with Harry Drew via Facebook, and you
Yeah.
know Harry Drew yourself.
Mhm.
He's the first one that mentioned to me that he basically gave me the idea of what your hypothesis is, and I'm not going to give any
Mhm.
spoilers, but he's the first one that told me about that, and I thought I never even thought about, because what people thought it was,
Mhm.
because where the crashes were taking place, Alamogordo, um,
The
near Area
Kingdom.
51 or
Yeah.
near the Nevada test site, people were saying that it's related to the nuclear weapons testing, above ground nuclear weapons testing.
Hmm.
I thought that was legit until I heard what Harry Drew had to say, and then after hearing what you were talking about in your investigation, I think there is an alternate
Yeah.
possibility
Well,
what's
I also
causing these
reached
things to
out to
crash.
Scott Ramsey and Stanton Friedman before he passed, and Stanton Friedman said I was onto something with that. And I talked to Scott Ramsey. He did the Aztec UFO crash. I know a lot of people are skeptical if that really happened or not, but Scott Ramsey was saying he found out there was two of those. Well, I'll get into that in a minute. Um, I'll give like a basics outline of the incidents real quick.
Cool.
For those of your viewers who don't know the general stories, um, one of the major projects that I've undergone in the past 10 years or so, in 1952, a UFO supposedly crashed into a large copper mine outside of Ely, Nevada, close to a town named Ruth. This object crashed into a snowbank. It was discovered by miners that were working at this mine, and lots of the individuals who lived in the small towns nearby saw this object as it was flying through the air prior to it crashing in this mine. So, um, the main person that saw it was a security deputy for the Kennecott Corporation. His name was Pete. Pete happened to be on the opposite side of the mine than where this object had come down and crashed into the snowbank. He ended up driving his truck over to where he saw this impact zone, and he happened to see a silver metallic looking object. He said it looked almost pewter looking, like a dull gray look. He says that there was no windows, there was no seams, you couldn't see any kind of rivets, and he said that he didn't know what this thing was. So he happened to drive his truck back to where he was prior and got another security guard named Vern. Vern and Pete drove back on a second trip back to where the object was sitting on a snowbank. And Vern had described the object the same way that Pete did. And so they took a third trip back and picked up a whole truckload full of people and drove it back on a third trip. Well, this is where the stories get interesting. People were saying that the object looked as if it was wet, like it was sprayed down with a garden hose, is what some people said. And other people said it was dripping like a thick liquid, almost like a syrup or like a ooze of some kind. And in the middle of all this going on, one of the higher ups at the mine had called the Ely Police Department, and they said that they had thought that a satellite or that a plane had crashed in the mine. So the Ely Police Department called the National Guard out. It's an artillery unit. It's what do you call it? It's an anti-aircraft artillery unit that were formed in 1949. Of course, their job isn't to seal off areas for UFOs. That's not really their job. So at that point in time, I guess the military took what they could get, and they managed to form a roadblock and the entrance to the mine, and they were making all these miners leave the mine. Meanwhile, while the National Guard unit from Ely was sealing off the mine, there was a top secret recovery team coming down from Hill Air Force Base in Ogden, Utah. And it was going to take 3 to 4 hours from them to get to this mine to pick up this object. So a crowd was forming at the entrance to the mine, and the guards that were guarding this roadblock were telling the people to go back to their homes that a small plane had crashed into the mine. But at this point, it was kind of too late, because the people that were just in the mine that were sent home were obviously telling their friends and families that something that wasn't a plane had crashed in the mine. And to make a long story short, this top secret recovery team ends up arriving from Hill Air Force Base. They come through the back entrance of the mine. And the people that were at the front entrance of the mine, the normal civilians, they had no idea this was going on. And they loaded this object up onto trucks, and they drove back through the back entrance to the mine, and they brought this object to a dirt airfield where there were some military bombers. The bombers flew the object to Hill Air Force Base, and from Hill Air Force Base, they brought it to Wright-Patterson. Well, the next thing I'm going to talk to your viewers about, some people will think this doesn't make a whole lot of sense right away, but I promise you, give me a few minutes, this will make a lot more sense. So in 1955, the U.S. military started designing a top secret aircraft called the X-15 rocket plane. The X-15 rocket plane was supposed to replace the U-2 as almost like a spy plane, because one of the U-2s happened to crash over in Eastern Europe, and as a result, the U.S. government was trying to build a plane that could go faster and higher and be less detectable by radar. So the X-15 rocket plane would be flown up into the air and dropped out of the door on a bomber, and then it would take flight from there. And this plane could fly into the lower atmosphere, and then it would glide down and land on a runway like a normal airplane can. So in order to do tests on this rocket plane, they would take off from Edwards Air Force Base in California, and they would fly up to Wendover, Utah, and back. So the military, in order to monitor this flight corridor, they needed to build some radar tracking towers. They built one tower over in Edwards Air Force Base, which was the largest and most advanced out of the three. They built one over in Beatty, Nevada, and then they built one on top of Kimberly Mountain, which overlooks most of the Ely area. And in order for them to get a long range on these radar tracking towers, they had to have a high amount of power. The typical range would have been 25 miles for one of these radar towers. So they needed 50 miles. In order to do 50 miles, you have to get double the power. So this ended up having negative consequences on the operators of these radio stations. A lot of the people got cancer, but the whole point was they were tracking this X-15 rocket plane. In 1959, they ended up becoming operational, and this radar tower was tracking the X-15 until 1968. And then they even continued using this tower afterwards for different purposes. But in 1964, there was supposedly another UFO crash that happened north of where the first one did, about 30 to 40 miles away from there. And of course, like I stated, the original radar tower had a range of 50 miles, and this object crashed within that 50-mile area. So
No,
before I continue on with the
wait, can
1964
I
story,
just
go ahead.
ask you real quick? Did you say that the radar went operational in '59?
Yep, 1959. And they started building it in 55.
Okay, I thought the first crash took place in '52.
The first one took place in 1952.
Hmm.
I believe this second UFO crash had to do with the radio tower. The first one, I'm not so sure of because it didn't
Okay,
exist at that point in time. But the
okay.
second one, I for sure think had something to do with it.
The reason I brought that up because the Kingman aircraft or UFO crash, alleged UFO
Mhm.
crash, took place in '53, wasn't it?
Yes, there was two crashes in 1953. Um, One of them was by Red Lake. The other one was by the Hualapai National Monument, and they had the same exact radio equipment that the Ely Kimberly Mountain Station had, but theirs was on a place called Radar Hill that was 3 miles away from Kingman,
Hmm.
and those UFOs crashed about 15 miles from that. I had spoken to Scott Ramsey, who did the Aztec UFO crash, and he was saying that that supposedly crashed in 1948. And doing some research, he found out that there were similar radar towers built, one by Alamogordo, and there was one. Was it one by White Sands and one by Roswell Army Airfield? Sorry. And of course, there was the Roswell UFO crash.
Hmm.
And if you believe in, there was two of them that day. So there's a possibly about 5 or 6 UFOs that had crashed in close proximity to these same type of radar towers. Harry Drew, he had a hypothesis. He said he thought that they would build these towers in areas where UFOs had crashed on purpose, is what he thought. Because the way he worded it was that he was thinking the military was thinking if a UFO had crashed, that another UFO would be back in the same area eventually. Like I said, I don't know if that's true or not, but that's what Harry told me when I was talking to him about his idea on the radar towers and UFOs.
Okay, so I'm sorry that I interrupted you, but I just wanted to clarify that the first crash that you investigated, the '52 crash,
Mm-hmm.
was more than likely not associated with the radar tracking
Yeah, the first one I don't
towers.
think had anything to do with the radar. I'm not 100% sure why that crashed. The second one, I'm pretty sure the radar had something to do with it. Um, I'm not 100% sure how it had anything to do with it, but I do think it definitely, just from seeing that other UFOs have crashed for similar radar towers, were. Something I like to bring up to people, if you notice on those UFO crash lists, if you look them up on the internet, there's a disproportionate amount of UFOs that crash in the 1950s and 60s. And that is when the United States military was experimenting with those radar towers and figuring out how to track airplanes and how it works.
Okay.
Because radar track the technology came out in the 30s, but they weren't really perfecting it until the 50s and 60s.
Mhm. Um, Very good. So please continue. You left off with the 1964.
Yes, so this radar tower came operational in 1959. Um, so in 1964, I heard the story from a man. He was a brakeman on on a Nevada Northern Railway ore train, and this ore train was carrying copper products from McGill, Nevada, going north up to like the Seattle area where they could bring it to market. And he said that this train came around a bend in the tracks, and when it came around a bend in the tracks, he said that you could see that there was trouble up ahead. The tracks were completely destroyed and they were thrown around like pretzels. He was his exact words. And he says before he could see what was going on, he hit the brakes on this train and caused a partial derailment of the train. When the train actually stopped, he says he looked off to his right, and when he looked off to his right, you could see that there was a blown apart metallic cylinder, is what he called it, like a cylinder shape. And he says it was laying upside down up against the base of this mountain. And whatever had come down from his point of view, from his left side, hit this farmer's field, bounced, hit the railroad tracks, and then exploded on the side of this mountain. Meanwhile, when this object plowed into the ground, one of the ends of the cylinder got blown out, and it was going end over end and was throwing whatever was inside the craft all over this farm field and all over these railroad tracks. Um, there are reports of alien bodies. I'll get into that in just a moment. But so this train stops, and he says when they get out of the train, there was 3 to 4 female ranchers on horseback that were already at the area. And he said one of the women at one point in time was even standing on top of this object. The women rode away shortly after the train got there, but he said they didn't talk. The two groups didn't talk to each other. I think the women got scared when the train pulled up and they rode off. So,
Hey, real quick, Jeremy.
yep.
Uh, Nick Madrid asked a question. Welcome to the live stream, Nick. Thanks for being here, buddy. Um, what were they mining at the crash site? Now we're talking about two different crashes.
Mhm.
So what's the mine that is in that area? Because both of these crashes were very relatively close to each
The
other.
mine was called the Robinson Copper Mine. It was owned by Kennecott back at that point in time. It's owned by KGHM nowadays. It's a copper mine. They primarily mine copper, but a byproduct they also get small amounts of gold out of there. So nowadays they do gold and copper. At that point in time, it was mostly copper.
Isn't it
Um,
true that with when you're mining those precious metals, it also is there you get a lot of quartz in those mines as well?
yes.
So that could be, if these objects were in the area for the mines, it
Hmm.
could be a number of materials that they were interested in.
Oh, I agree.
Yeah.
Lots of UFO sightings happen around bodies of water and they happen around mines in general for some reason. And of course, because that's one of the biggest copper mines in the country, they have a tailings pond, which is massive because it's one of the biggest copper mines. And then, of course, you have the mine itself. So even nowadays, you hear a lot of the workers saying that there are lots of UFO sightings in that area in general.
Hmm.
And one thing I'd like to mention is the general area where this is sited. The closest major city is Salt Lake City or Las Vegas, and it's a 4-hour drive. So it's a couple hundred miles. It's one of the most isolated places in the lower 48. Um, so there's these female ranchers at the site when the train pulls up. They ride away. The guys on the train use a CB radio to call back to Ely, Nevada, where the dispatcher is for the train station. They call the dispatcher, who then calls the Ely Police Department, who then calls the same National Guard unit, the Battery Battalion A, the National Guard unit that was at the 1952 crash. So this same group comes out to quarantine the area. But when they arrive, they take the crew of people, there's 7 people on a train crew. They were riding a RS4 train engine. So they take the men off of the train and they bring them to the Ely jail, and that's where they end up getting interrogated. Meanwhile, a wrecking crane is called out from the Northern Nevada Railway train station. That same wrecking crane is still on display there, and they still use it occasionally for demonstrations.
Is that in
So
Ely or is that at the mine?
that's in Ely.
Okay,
It was owned because the Nevada Northern Railway and the mine worked together
got it.
from the early 1900s up until the early 80s when they stopped using the trains. Um, they worked hand in hand.
Yeah.
But
You know what? And I just want to say, when you mentioned earlier, I have driven through that area, that part of Nevada,
mm-hmm,
and it absolutely is nothing out there. There's,
mm-hmm.
there are hundreds of miles of nothing but flat landscape, but it's surrounded by huge mountain ranges.
It's
It's
beautiful up there. It's
yeah,
just
it
no
is.
one
It's
lives there,
absolutely stunning.
and it's freezing year round pretty much.
Yeah. N- uh, Now I haven't been over to Ely itself, but
Mm-hmm.
up in that northern Nevada area you know, north. Was it east? Is it northeastern?
It's like central eastern Nevada.
Okay, okay.
But like I know they get heavy snowstorms almost year round. I was there on 4th of July 3 or 4 years ago, and it was snowing on 4th of July there.
Wow. Um, so the the railwaymen were taken to the jail. They were
Mhm.
interrogated. Were they let go, or did they hold them for
They
a
were
time?
let go the same day, actually, which was shocking to me. I've spoken to the engineer, the brakeman, the conductor, and I've spoken to, I don't want to call it the navigator, but it's almost like a navigator. So I've
Wait,
spoken to
so
four
wait,
out of the seven.
so you actually talked to the eyewitnesses?
Yep, I've spoken to pretty
Wow.
much all of them. I've spoken to the female ranchers. I've spoken to two of the three, or two. I'm confused whether there's three or four because the stories they go back and forth. But I've spoken to at least two of them.
Wow.
So they call this wrecking crane in. The wrecking crane eventually, if for those of your viewers that don't know what a wrecking crane is, a wrecking crane is basically a crane, a heavy duty crane that's used for railroad accidents. And it's on a rail car. It's not on like on wheels like a car. It drives on the rails like a train. And they needed this wrecking crane because when the convoy from Hill Air Force Base eventually got there, they had to pick up the bulk of the object using this wrecking crane to put it on the back of the trucks. Um, so before I continue, one thing I would like to say, I did get a call one day from a man who said that he had grown up on a ranch in that general area, and he had no idea I'd spoken to the people on the train. He told me that when he was 10 or 12 years old, his mom had picked up pieces of a spaceship out in the valley. And he told me that the pieces were green and black, and they had so it looked like glitter or sparkles in it. And he told me that his mom, who was still alive at that point in time, and she's still alive to this day, she's 96 now, but he said his mom still had pieces of it. So the story that he had was his mom had rode out to the valley. She picked up pieces of this and put it in her saddlebags. And he said that when his mom was picking up pieces of this, that a Nevada Northern Railway train came riding up, and it scared his mom, and his mom rode away on horseback. So it was almost the same exact story that the guy on the train told me.
It's
And
so it's
those were the first,
corroborating
yeah, the first
corroborating the
two.
story that you heard from the train. Uh,
Oh yeah, those were the first two witnesses I ever spoke to from that
that's
specific
amazing.
incident. And I spoke to them both within like a couple days of each other, so that was pretty cool. Um, so
Well, you know what? So this is a really fascinating part of this whole story,
mhm.
and I don't want to take up too much time on this because I want to get to the other part of it. But in Roswell, which took place what 14, 17 years,
1947.
so it took place 17 years prior.
Mhm.
Roswell, 1947. This was 64, right?
Yep.
17 years prior. In that instance, if you believe the evidence, the witness testimony, the government came in and really heavy-handedly put the put the gag order on those people with threats and
Oh yeah.
you know who knows what kind of threats they put on those people. But in this instance, the Ely
Mhm.
crash, and this was the second Ely crash.
Yes, and they're both about, like I said, about 20, 30 miles from each other.
There apparently was no gag order, no threats. I mean, there was some intimidation, some interrogation, but
Mhm.
there were no threats to keep these people quiet, right?
From the 64.
Yeah, from
As
the
far as I
witnesses
know,
that
just
you
the
talked
people on
with.
the train are the only ones I know. Them and the military guys that picked up the pieces of it. A quick story that because I didn't want to spend too much time on it. One of the most interesting stories that I've ever heard about this 1964 incident. Like I said, it takes about 3 to 4 hours for the convoy to get to the Ely area from Ogden, Utah. They said during that point in time, two of the higher ups for this National Guard unit went inside that blown out part of the craft. They actually went inside of it to see what was inside. They said that the object, of course, because it was upside down, they were standing on the roof. Because, yeah. So they're standing on the roof. They said it appeared as if you were standing out on the desert and there was no walls around you. They said it looked like you were standing just outside, but they said it looked as if everything was in a weird shade of green with black spots and glitter, um, almost like there was like a glitter around them. So it was very similar to what the rancher was saying, the pieces she picked up. And they thought they were inside this object for about 15 or 20 minutes, and it turns out they were actually in the object for an hour or two. So it's almost as if time had stopped in there or time had slowed down somehow. But I guess they swore up and down, both of them, when I talked to them, that they were only in there for a few minutes, and then everyone outside was happened to be at least an hour or two.
So were these the military
That was
personnel?
the National Guard unit, the Battery
National Guard?
Battalion A from Ely.
God, man, it's so fascinating that it blows my mind that you actually got witness testimony from this
Yes.
crash. That's what's mind blowing. Because again, you go back to Roswell and you have second or third generation testimony,
Hmm.
but the people that actually witnessed it, very
What
few
really
of
helped
them.
was I tried to find out information on my own, and no one would really talk to me. But once the word got out that my grandma was a school teacher, and friends of friends that knew my grandma started coming forward because they trusted my grandma, and that's how I ended up finding out. Because I
Oh,
know George
cool.
Knapp had gone out there at least 3 or 4 times, and he had no luck. Like
Wow.
not even like a year or two before I started. Because I started it when I was 18 years old in 2008 is when I started. I'm 31 in May actually. So I've basically done this for most of my adult life. I've gone to Ely doing the UFO stuff.
Happy early birthday, by the way.
Thank you. It's actually Mother's Day of all days.
Oh, cool. Oh, cool. So, man, now I got 1,000 more questions. So, before you get to the end of your, or actually, I'll let you finish, but kind
Mhm.
of abbreviate it from here because I want to get
I will.
to how you ended up on Coast to Coast, and then talk about if you have a relationship with George Knapp, or do you know George Knapp?
Yeah, I'll get into that. So,
Okay.
short version was the object was loaded onto military trucks and they brought it to Yelland Field. Yelland Field was a World War II training airport built outside of Ely. And after the war, they kind of just used it for small civilian aircrafts and for military exercises every once in a while. But unlike the first crash, they didn't drive it out. They just brought it from White Pine County, from a different part of White Pine County, out to Yellen Field, and they had awaiting bombers there, I guess, from what I was told.
Okay.
But George Knapp, I've spoken to him probably about 5 or 10 times about this. Um, I have a love-hate relationship with him. I hate to say it because at one point he was trying to tell me he wanted my story to make a news thing about it, like a news story, but I was being asked to give him my story and let him basically take the credit for it, and I said no. So me and him got into it at that point in time over that. um, my mom actually works with someone that's best friends with him, so I speak with him every once in a while if I bring him up. But he's interested in the story. I spoke to Stanton Friedman a lot before he passed away. Try to think who else I've spoken to. Linda Moulton Howe, I've talked to her before. Frank Fascino, he did the Flatwoods UFO things. I spoke with him. Harry Drew, of course. Scott Ramsey. Spoken to quite a bit of them. I was on the Art Bell show, his Midnight in the Desert, which I'd hate to say it, that wasn't one of my better shows I've done because the story's changed since then. I just started out doing interviews at that point in time. Um, since I had done that interview, different witnesses have come forward that have changed certain parts of the story. But that interview is really easy to find if anyone's curious. But me and Art ended up getting into an argument during that interview actually, because he was mad that I was using a cell phone and not using like a landline.
Right.
But Art, I had spoken to his producer days before, and I had told his producer that I was going to be using a cell phone, which I don't know why it was a surprise the night of the show. I had told Art during the show, I said, if you want me to drive to Pahrump to the studio, I will do it face to face. And then shortly after, in the middle of us talking, I got hung up on, and then I had never heard from him again. And then I
Bummer.
got a bunch of angry emails from his listeners saying I had been rude to Art Bell somehow. So
He was very well loved. by many
I actually
people.
looked up to him before that, and then after I did the interview, I kind of uh, shied away from him and wasn't really into his show anymore because I felt like I felt personally that he didn't treat me very well when I was on his show.
Mhm. I, I hate to say, but it could possibly be because of your age.
I think so.
Yeah.
He the thing was he didn't go in chronological order with the incidents. He kind of bounced around, and to his listeners, it sounded like it was confusing to the listeners. I think was another reason why people didn't like that interview very much.
Okay.
I mean, it wasn't very confusing to me, obviously, because I know what happened and everything. But to the everyday person at that point in time, no one really knew the story.
Yeah. Well, that's unfortunate. I was hoping to hear some good Art Bell stories, but that's not really a good
Yeah,
one.
me and Art don't really get along when
That's
he
too
was
bad.
alive.
That's too bad. Um, but it does sound like you've done, I mean, you've been in this area of study for 15 years,
Yes.
15, 16 years. Okay. And, I mean, it sounds like you've really gone far and wide with your research, talking to the people
hmm
who are going to be, push your research forward.
Oh, I agree. The
Yeah.
thing is, the way I look at it too, I think ufology in general needs some young blood because most of the famous ufologists are in their 70s and 80s now, the ones that were popular in like the 80s and 90s. And I think when those people eventually die off, there's not really going to be a whole lot of researchers that actually not very many in general that people really know about.
Well, there's, and I'll have to push back on that a little bit
I mean, there's
because
some, but I think there's not going to be as many that there are now, like the
there
famous.
are there is a huge movement going on over on Twitter. It's
hmm
primarily on Twitter, but everybody's got multiple social media accounts.
hmm
So you got people on Twitter, people on YouTube, people on Facebook that are doing some hardcore research,
hmm
that are the next generation. People that are, I mean, there's people. Have you heard of the debrief?
Yes.
Okay, those are good, hard hitting, legitimate journalists, and they've got a girl on their team that's just out of college or still in college, and she's an up and coming researcher.
hmm
So there is a new wave of researchers that are coming along. You're obviously one of those younger researchers, even though you've been doing it for a long time.
Yeah. Well, I had
Um,
spoken to Robert Wood. He is based out of California. His dad is on the actual board for MUFON. And I had spoken to him around Christmas time. And he said that he was going to try to see if he could get me to speak at one of the symposiums, probably next year or the year after, is what he was saying
Very cool. If if
about the Ely crashes.
if you're not active on Twitter, I know that you got a Twitter
My
account.
brother runs our Twitter for our
Uh,
group. I don't
okay.
personally have one though.
I suggest you get on there because the UFO Twitter community is a really growing, very
Mhm.
active, sometimes opposing, um, very bipolar almost
Yeah.
community because you get people that say one thing and then people pile on, against that person. It's a
hmm
very uh, contentious community, but they're really doing some good things, and I I want to give you a chance to finish up your story about the crash because that's where your research is
hmm
focused. But then, we'll get into talking a little bit more about UFO research and disclosure.
Well, I actually finished the story about the train
Oh, okay.
incident. Basically, it crashed into the railroad tracks, and then they uh, they brought it to Yellen Field and they flew it away to Hill Air Force Base again. So
And then
I'm not
from
sure where
from
it went
Hill, it went
after
out to
that.
Wright Patterson.
Yeah, well, the 1960s crash, I know for sure it went to Hill Air Force Base, but I don't know where it went once it got there.
Hmm.
The 1950s thing I know did go to Wright Patterson after it went to Hill Air Force Base.
And
Because I
how did
spoke to a
how
woman.
how how are you so sure of that it ended up in Wright Patterson?
Well, I spoke to a woman, and she said her dad was actually one of the men that drove the trucks to Area 51 in the 1950s when that thing crashed.
Mhm.
And she says that he had spoken to people that he had worked with who said that it was going to Hill Air Force Base. Um, so I did speak with a couple guys that worked over at Hill Air Force Base at that point in time. They weren't flying the planes or anything, but they were kind of like depot men that were loading and unloading planes. And he said that they were loading pieces of whatever that thing was into a bomber that was going to Wright-Patterson.
Yeah, Nick just asked because it's so incredible, it's so amazing that you actually spoke to witnesses.
Yes,
But keep in
I
mind,
spoke.
Nick, the witnesses that Jeremy spoke with were actually witnesses to the 64 crash, not the 52 crash.
Yes, well, I spoke to um, the two guys that went inside the craft. I spoke to a couple of the ranchers. I spoke to um, about what was it, four people that were on the train out of seven, and then I spoke to a couple different people that were in charge of like running the wrecking crane and people that were driving it from the crash site to Yellen Field.
Yeah, it's just it's incredible that this story has not blown up, and this is why you got to get on UFO Twitter and start
Mhm.
letting these people know
Well,
about your
Robert Wood,
research.
I spoke to because there's a Robert Wood, there's a Ryan Wood and a Robert Wood. Ryan Wood, I'm good friends with him. I told him the story over the phone years ago when I first started out, and then he happened to contact me again saying that he was writing a UFO book on UFO crashes and he wanted to put a few pages on the Ely incidents. And I told him the long version, what I know now versus what I knew like 10 years ago when I first talked to him. And he had told his dad Robert Wood, and he was shocked because he was like saying, "How did we not have someone talk about this at the symposium before?" So
Absolutely.
last I heard, he said to let him know when my book comes out, and then he said they'll try to get me at one of the symposiums.
Cool. Yeah, this story needs to get out there. um, one other question from Nick: Did anybody have any medical conditions or issues? And no,
People
so
that handled the bodies, or people that were involved in the just the pieces of the wreckage.
well, to clarify, we're talking about the 64 crash because you did mention that there were people that were radar technicians that
Mhm.
suffered from radiation from working on the radar.
The
It
radar
was
people I do know for sure. A lot of them got different forms of cancer. As far as people that handled the wreckage, the thing is, Ely, Nevada is located close to the test site, and they were all downwinders from when they were testing the bombs.
yes,
So it's hard to say the people that lots of those people did die of cancers and things like that. But it's hard to say whether it was because of handling that wreckage or if it was just because they lived close to where they were testing the bombs.
yeah, exactly. And Nick clarifies what he was asking that sometimes uh, witnesses of UFOs do suffer from medical problems.
Hmm.
And that's true. I've heard of instances where people did have medical issues, from being in close proximity to something. Um, so the 52 crash, you're pretty confident that it ended up at Wright Patterson. The
That
64
one I am
crash,
pretty confident.
not
The
sure where
other
it
one,
ended
I
up.
don't know where it went because in 1964, Area 51 did exist, but it wasn't as big as it is nowadays. Because there was still civilians mining in the Groom Lake Valley in the mid to the late 1950s. So Area 51 at that point in time was basically just a runway and some hangars. In the 1960s, I'm not 100% sure what it looked like, but I know there was no civilians in the area at that point in time. But my guess is that it wasn't as expansive as it is nowadays.
Yeah.
But the U-2 did come out in the 50s, I believe, right? During the Cold War.
The U2, it was
Because the
out.
rocket plane was supposed to replace the U-2, and they started doing that in the early 60s.
Yeah, the U2, I think it was developed in 55 or 57
Yes.
because it was in use for several years before it was shot down in East Siberia, East Russia.
Hmm.
Did you through your research, did you ever look at any of the police records from those time periods?
The thing is, the Ely Police Department was turned into White Pine County Sheriff in 1982. And I've called them, I've emailed them, and I've gone down there. They said all of the records were supposedly purged when they went from Ely Police Department to White Pine County Sheriff.
That is such a crock.
Yeah,
Why would they do that?
something like that. You know for a fact that they have those UFO records somewhere.
Yeah. Why
Even
would
whether
they?
it's at that police station or someone took them away from there's somewhere.
There are genealogists that are just probably pulling their hair out to hear that records have been purged, official
Oh yeah.
public records have been purged. That's insane.
But what's weird though is the White Pine County Museum has employment records from the mine going back to the 1800s.
There
So
you
that's
go.
helpful because when people give me names of people that supposedly were involved, I could go there. I've done it before and looked them up to see old employment records to make sure that they were actually there when they said they were.
Yeah. That's just being a thorough investigator, looking
Yeah.
into things like that. Um, so your appearance on Coast to Coast resulted in an incident where you may have what encountered a men in black, or the military came at you to your doorstep. What were they looking for?
Um that the night before I was actually on the Art Bell show and I was
Oh,
speaking
I'm
about
sorry. I said
yeah.
Coast to Coast, but it was the Art Bell show.
Well,
Go
it
ahead.
was yeah, the Art Bell's Midnight in the Desert.
Okay.
I was speaking about possible pieces of the UFO that someone was going to give me at that point in time. And not even 12 hours later, when I got off work, or about 12, 15 hours later, that guy blocked me in my driveway and started asking me all about where the pieces were, if I had them, where did I get it, where did it come from. And they did contact my friend too, the one that does the UFOs, my friend Nick. They did contact him. He lives on the other side of the city, and he told me that they had contacted him as well on the same day.
So just for anybody that wants to meet the Men in Black, go on somebody's radio show, make a movie, and say that you have UFO, uh, a piece of a UFO. Men in Black will show
Yeah,
up at your doorstep, right?
yeah, they were there. Not even 24 hours, less than 24 hours. They were at my house, and
Wow.
I got calls from Hill Air Force Base, Nellis Air Force Base. It was someone that I've never heard of in South Carolina was calling, all within the same day as this guy showing up.
Yeah.
So that's how I know like this had to have been legit, whoever that guy was. He didn't introduce himself and had no name badge on or anything.
What
But at
year?
that point in time, I was maybe 21, 22, something like that. So I wasn't really thinking like I do nowadays. I didn't think about asking him what his name was or anything.
What year was that approximately?
I'd say 2010, 2012.
Oh, okay. So that's relatively recent. Um,
Yes.
there was and I mean, as you're, I'm sure, familiar, there's since 2017, the government
Hmm.
has actually been coming out publicly and saying that there are things in our skies they don't know what they are. They've
Yes.
released some videos, and now there's a big push. And then we're going to talk about the disclosure movement here, and it is a great segue to get into that right now.
Hmm.
But before we do that, Nick has a question that you might not want to answer. So, do you have the debris, or did you give it to somebody for research, or can you
Um,
discuss it? Do you want
the
the Men in
only
Black at your doorstep again?
well, the only way to answer this, they knew that I had something and they wanted it, but they didn't get it. Um, that's the only thing I could say about that because last time I talked about it, they showed up at the
Yeah, yeah. And we're not saying that you have it or you don't
Mhm.
have it, but at one time you may or may not have had it,
Yes,
and
and
because
it
of
was
your
from the 1950s incident.
yeah, and because of your claim, the Men
Yes,
in Black showed up, or the U.S. government. I mean, everybody believes that the U.S. government is probably responsible for the Men in Black sightings. Although
yes.
Some people speculate that it could be something else and possibly more
Well,
nefarious.
a quick way to word that what they wanted. That object was dripping a weird ooze or a syrup substance. People were saying when they arrived in the bed of that truck. When the object was hauled away, a couple days later, there was a couple days later. I worded that wrong. A couple days later, there was metal slag all over the ground and where this object was sitting. And somebody may or may not have picked up some of that metal slag and told me about it or given it to me, and that's what happened.
And the interesting thing is what you mentioned on your presentation for MUFON
Yeah.
was the slag that had dripped off of, had oozed off of the craft,
Mm-hmm.
and it dripped off into the shape of the craft.
Yeah, it was like a perfect circle, almost like the perfect outline of the object.
Yeah, that's amazing.
And what's
Um,
weird to me is the military didn't pick it up, or maybe they did try to pick it up and didn't get it all. But the people that saw it, they were all miners going back to work, and they happened to just go in that area and saw that. So I don't know why the military wouldn't have picked that up, or maybe they just. I'm not 100% sure why it was still there.
it's a good question. Um, do you know a person named Jacques? Are you talking about Jacques Vallée, Nick? We'll get his answer because there's a little bit of a delay.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that leads us right into the next topic that I'd like to discuss with you, and we'll talk about this until um, we close it out. But a few more minutes. The disclosure movement. There's a big push right now going on from Congress, members of Congress,
Mm-hmm.
in the recent bill. You familiar with that?
A little bit. I know. They were saying when Congress met back in, was it November or
Yeah,
January?
yeah.
They were saying that they tacked on as part of the stimulus package that they were supposed to release a bunch of UFO information. Is that
They
what you're
actually
talking about?
formed a UFO research group out of the Department of Defense called the
Mhm.
UAPT. You're familiar with the new term that they call UFOs, right? UAPs.
Yes.
So it's the UAP Task Force, which is this new group that was formed under the jurisdiction of the Department of Defense. I think it's the DNI, um,
Hmm.
and they were given 180 days to come up with a report, um,
Yes.
and that report is supposed to be out in June 25th. Um,
Hmm.
since then, as I mentioned, the people on UFO Twitter uh, and people within the YouTube community who have YouTube channels, um,
Hmm.
pretty much under the um, I guess the push of a single person named Luis Jimenez has
Hmm.
started this movement called the Big Phone Home, and they're really trying to push and encourage people, just average people. Doesn't even matter if you're a researcher or an
Hmm.
investigator or a witness. If you're just interested in the topic, to call your
Is that the one you said
representatives.
is in Laughlin coming up?
No, that's the UFO. Uh, I think that's the International UFO Congress that's coming up in Laughlin. The yearly
Hmm.
conference. No, this is something that took place today. They did a big what do you call those where people call in? They do.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
I, I don't know what it's called, but they were encouraging everybody to call their Congress members, call their representatives, and ask them
Hmm.
to be for transparency, so that our scientists in the public sector and our researchers can get access to the data and the information that the military and the government has. So
Hmm.
it's the Big Phone Home. If you want to find out more about it, you can go to thebigphonehome.com. A couple of people that are in the live stream now were also on the in the chat on that live stream. So there's a lot of cooperation between people that are within this community, to encourage Congress to put pressure on the DoD to give us that information into the public sector, what information that they have. And I think it's going really well. They had a huge turnout today with that, with the big phone home. It was a huge success. Um, what does UAP stand for? Unidentified aerial phenomenon is what it stands for. Um, but I still use the term UFO. I think they're synonymous.
Yeah.
How do you feel about that?
I usually say flying saucers when I give lectures to people, only because I feel like most flying saucers, people know you're speaking about something from somewhere else. If you say UFO, it could mean something we made, or it could mean something from somewhere else.
Oh, that's a good point. Yeah, that is a good point. And y- anything that's flying in the skies that's unknown could be ours or theirs, or somebody who knows what it is, right?
Yeah.
And we won't get into the speculation of what you think these things are, because that's a whole hour or two conversation. We don't really want to go down that rabbit hole right now.
Yeah.
But as far as disclosure is concerned, what does that look like to you? What do you want for
Um,
disclosure?
I actually think they don't really need to say a whole lot in general. I think, in my personal opinion, the government obviously knows more than the average person does, but I don't think they know the answers to every question that some people say. I think they do know definitely more than we do. Um, I think the only thing they really need to say is for first, like say Roswell, for instance, if they would just admit that, okay, what people are saying happened really happened, or whether it did or didn't happen, they tell the truth about it. I don't think people would flip out. I don't think people would be killing themselves like when War of the Worlds came out. um I think in this day and age, I think people would find it really interesting, and it would not make them look as bad, I guess, to do it sooner rather than later. I mean, I personally hope that they come forward with everything, because other countries have, like several European countries have, but the United States government, I think, knows more than any other one about this.
Well, somebody, I think somebody asked you in the MUFON meeting the other night if you know of other crashes that took place in other countries around
Mhm.
that same time frame. Uh, did you have you done any research on other countries?
I know some from Russia, and I know some from Africa, and I know of a few of them from out towards Norway. I don't know of that specific time frame. The only ones I could really think of are in Eastern Russia, and I know of one in South Africa. But um, I do know for a fact that there is a crash up by Elko, Nevada from 1953. That one is another one I did lots of research on, but I haven't really mentioned that one tonight or the other night when I did my
Okay.
other lecture.
Yeah, there's I mean, we could talk about this stuff for hours. We're just going to have to bring you back
Oh
on
yeah,
to talk
Andrew,
about
check
it
your
again.
email, by the way. I sent you a message.
You got my email?
Yeah, the one that you and me were writing each other on.
Okay. Um, let me go through a couple more things, because there's a couple of organizations that I like to talk about, just in case the guest doesn't know about it and anybody listening is not familiar with it. But the Scientific Coalition for UAP Studies is a group of scientists that have started up relatively recently. I think in 2016 or 2017, um, after the New
Hmm.
York Times article came out. They may have been around to that, but they really came into becoming well known. Are you familiar with them?
Not too much.
Okay. Their website is explorescu.org. I encourage you
Hmm.
to look into what they got going on. because it
Mhm.
is, like I said, it's a group of scientists, and they peer review others' research. So if
Yes.
you submit your research to them, they will peer review it, and it just
Mhm.
gives you that next level of credibility.
Yeah, that'd
It's
be
not
cool.
something you, huh?
I said that would be cool.
Yeah,
I'd do it.
not something you have to do, but it just gives you that extra level. Since you're a field investigator, you go out into the field, and do you actively look for sightings to see if you can see sightings?
We do. When I most of the time when I do the when I do that kind of stuff, I bring my friend Nick or my brother with me. But yeah, we do. A lot of it that I do is based out of White Pine County and Lincoln County in Nevada. I do go to like Nye County and I go outside in like Clark County, but most of it's from northern Nevada. That's a lot of those types of things that I do.
Got it. So there is a technology out there that's available. There's a uh, it's a nonprofit company that has developed this system called the Sky Hub. Have
Hmm.
you heard of this?
Is that the one where I'm thinking for some reason? I know I'm thinking of SETI.
No,
Is it
it's it's a tracker. It's a tracking unit that you can put out in your yard, put it on your roof.
Mhm,
One friend of mine I know put it on his car, put it on the top of his vehicle. Um, it has cameras, and it has
mhm,
tracking sensors inside of it that will compare whatever it picks up, and it compares it to it sends the data to a central database, which is
mhm,
controlled by this SkyHub organization. That data is then ran through their algorithms, their AI, and it's
mhm,
parsed into different categories. You know, if it's if it's something that is known, airline traffic or satellites or birds or whatever,
mhm.
it's put into one category. If it's unknown, put into another category. So they're collating, collecting all this data and making it available to the scientific community. It may be something that you would want to consider adding to
Yeah, I haven't
your
heard of that before.
toolkit. Okay, so it's skyhub.org.
Mhm,
They have a big growing community of people. The technology is off the shelf items that you can go out and purchase and build
mhm.
it yourself. They
Yeah,
don't offer it as a pre-built. It's not like you can go buy a computer. It is a computer basically, but you have to build it yourself using the parts that they recommend.
mhm.
But you don't buy it from them because they're a nonprofit. You go out and buy it yourself. They tell you which parts you need to do
Yeah,
whatever capabilities you want. And there's different types of builds. But again, that's another organization to look into. Get involved with their community, possibly if you're interested.
mhm.
And then the big phone home. Since you're a researcher and you have a voice in the community, I encourage you to get involved with the disclosure movement that the big phone home is really working towards right now.
Mhm.
And that website is thebigphonehome.com. And the 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 founder of that website, and uh, I don't know what you would call it, the person who started the movement is
Yeah,
Luis Jimenez, and his YouTube channel is the Unidentified Celebrity Review. So those are the groups and organizations that I like to talk about. That I think are doing really good things for the community. That along with UFO Twitter, you should
yeah.
really get on UFO Twitter, man. Uh,
I need to make an account for that.
yeah, yeah, because your research is, you've done some really good research, some really rigorous research. You're talking about topics that a lot of people have an interest in. Uh,
Mhm.
as soon as you start doing symposiums and conferences and talking about the stuff, people are going to want to know how to reach out to you. And
Yeah.
UFO Twitter is really the biggest community out there of UFO enthusiasts. So, with that said, I'd like to get your final thoughts. Anything that we talked about that you'd like to expound on?
Well, I am still actively researching the Ely cases. My next thing that I'm going to do this summer, actually, probably Memorial Weekend, I'm going to go out to the 1964 crash and we're going to try to metal detect the staging area, the area that the military set up their camp in. Because when Harry Drew went out to the site that in 1953, where they said that their staging area, I guess you would call it, he found like military trash, like cans and things, which he used for proof that that was their staging area. So we have the area that we were told was the staging area. So now we just need to kind of use metal detectors, hopefully find something to prove that that's where that actual area was. I do believe that there are pieces of that UFO somewhere out there too. That's another reason we are trying to metal detect the area. Because if that thing was flipping end over end, they said at least 30 to 40% of that object was completely destroyed from hitting the ground and bouncing around. And if it was violently doing that, there's got to be at least something out there. It's like the size of a penny or something. In my opinion, there's got to be something out there.
It would be fascinating to find something, man. Definitely. I mean, it would definitely be worth spending a couple days out there metal detecting to find something. Um,
Mhm.
so
Well,
you,
I am writing a book still.
okay.
I'm expecting that to come out probably after the Sand Yeti documentary. I'll probably start working on that. Um, there are a couple of other UFO incidents that are in Nevada that I have studied and have could talk a lot about. But I figured I'll probably save that for another time. Um, Other than that, the other thing that's kind of cool that I'm looking into, supposedly Walker Lake, Nevada has UFOs that come in and out of the lake at night. I don't know if you've ever heard of that. And there's supposedly a series of tunnels that run out to the Pacific Ocean. I don't know if that's true or not, but that's another thing that we're thinking of filming a short documentary on that.
Okay, so I may is that the Navy base that's up there in the
Yes,
middle of Nevada? Okay, so go figure. Why is there a Navy base in the middle of Nevada? Right?
exactly. And there's
I
randomly there's supposed to be a lake monster in the lake too. I don't know anything really about that, but
yeah.
I guess in the 1800s up until like 1960, there was supposed to be a lake monster there too.
So apparently there's a submarine, not just a Navy base, but it's a submarine training base, right?
Yeah, and they said there's a group called the UFO Seekers. Is how I found out about this. They said there's an old story that says that there's tunnels that link the Pacific Ocean in California to Walker Lake, and they think that they make man-made UFOs come in and out of the lake at night. Not all the time, but I guess like a couple times a month. The locals say they see it.
Yeah.
There's an Indian
So
reservation out there.
real quick, are there any other hotspots? And I mean, I would really like to give people some ideas of where they could go sky watching, or I've had people
Hmm.
on here that do what's called sky fishing.
Hmm.
I've had other guests who, like I said, my friend Jeremy McGowan,
Yeah.
he's got a sky hub attached to his Range Rover or Land Rover, I think,
Hmm.
Land Rover, and he goes out four wheeling with his sky hub unit to try to catch UFOs on
In my
camera.
opinion, if you want to get really intense UFO sightings, like chasing cars and things, go to northeastern Nevada for sure. I know
Copy that.
lots and lots of stories of cars getting chased in White Pine County and in southern Elko County because no one hardly lives up there. There's some spooky stories about hunters and things getting chased out there.
Okay. Well, I mean, you said it. Anybody out there listening that wants to go out there and possibly get chased by a UFO? Um, Santa Maria 5248 asked which lake, and we were talking about Walker Lake, right?
Yeah, Walker Lake is the one where the man-made UFOs come in and out of the water.
Yeah. Um, that's northern
That's
Nevada.
northwest.
Yeah.
Most
So
of my
I
research is on the central and northeast of Nevada, and north and Nevada is where most of my stuff's from.
yeah, I've actually driven past that lake a couple times. That Navy base up there.
There's something scary in the summertime. They said there's a type of spider that migrates there, and everything has covered in like a million spiders. There's webs all over, and they say that you're not supposed to even leave your car because it's like I don't know if they're deadly or not, but it's really scary looking. I saw it on YouTube.
Wow. No, I haven't even heard of that. Wow, that's crazy. Um, so, I mean, we covered a ton of information, but I still think we could talk for a couple more hours. I would
Yeah, we
love to
could.
have you back on in the
Yeah,
near
I'd come back
future.
on for sure.
Okay. Maybe what I'll do is when you finish up your documentary and you get ready to drop it for
Yeah.
people, yeah, I'll bring you back on to help you get a little bit more exposure for it.
Yeah, that'll work. I sent you pictures of something I want you to look at in your emails, though.
Oh, okay, let me check it.
You
I
don't have to
forgot we
talk
were
about it
talking
right
about
now,
that.
but they're just pictures of something.
Yeah, I forgot we had talked about you sending me something. Oh, God. I mean, this is the behind the scenes stuff that people don't get to see. And,
Hmm.
if you guys want to see this kind of stuff, reach out to Jeremy.
Hmm.
And he's going to give you his contact information right now.
Yep.
Um,
If you want to contact me about, I guess if you want to contact me in general about anything, the easiest way to do it is to go to EliUFOCrash.com. Even if it's not about UFOs, if you write me on there, I write back everyone that writes me. Um, there's some pictures and things, of course, that I could send you over emails, like I just did to Andrew, that I obviously can't put out on the internet because I don't want more people showing up at my house. But
not
I
not
still,
saying that it's anything that people would want to come to his house for.
yeah. But yeah, so if you have a question or a comment, or if you want to reach out to me about a sighting or something, just write me an email. eliofocrash.com. There's also like a little contact form on there. If you don't want to give me your email, we want to write me on there, you could do that too.
Yeah, I definitely recommend you guys reach out to Jeremy. I mean,
Mhm.
he's a wealth of information. I just recently um, became familiar with him, and Luis Jimenez is in the chat room. He just jumped on here. Great dude.
Mhm.
In fact, Lou, I'd love to have you on here, man. Um, would you mind if I brought Lou in for a minute? He's the one that ran the big phone home. I
Yeah, you
just
could do
want
that.
to, yeah. If you want to stick around for a couple more minutes, I want to bring Lou in. Are you down
Yeah,
with
that's fine.
that, Lou?
I didn't realize my camera was so bright till a minute ago. I'm
Oh
sitting in
no,
the
you look
kitchen.
great.
It's really bright in here.
You look great, man. I keep mine dimmed down just for atmosphere.
Yeah. I was like, I don't remember it being this bright when I was on the MUFON meeting the other night.
Yeah, I'm gonna
I'm
sit,
sitting
I'm
in,
gonna shoot you a Twitter message real quick, Lou. But I got to pull up my Twitter. Can't
so
find
yeah, I'm sitting
anything.
in like the same spot and everything. It's same setup. I don't know why it looks so bright now.
Yeah. Um, just off to the right, I guess it would be. Looks like you have a really bright light out there.
Mm,
And so your the website
what's
you
that?
mentioned, the website, yeah, somebody sent me a text message and I got distracted. I'm sorry. I'm
That's
terrible
fine.
at this production stuff.
Mm,
um, yes, Nick asked for the web address, and I do want to give him that. So is it Ely UFO?
it's www.eliufocrash.com.
Okay, there we go.
I have an old website and a new website because the host of my old website is canceling the web hosting service in June. So I made a new website last month that I'm gonna use from this point on.
All right. Well, I'm a
Which is
web
that one that you
developer.
just gave? Yeah, that's my new website, the one that I just gave you.
I'm a web designer by trade, so we could talk after this
That'd be
if you
cool.
want. Maybe I could help you out with that. I just hit you on the there he is, Luis.
What's happening, guys?
What's up, my
Hey,
man? There's the man of the hour right there. Not taking anything away from my guest,
No,
mind
no, no,
you.
no, 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 man.
Jeremy's awesome, man.
I actually wanted to come on here because it wasn't until after everything has ended that I forgot to add you to the Big Phone Home, Andrew. I wanted you to be there.
Oh, you're
And in
awesome,
all
dude.
of the craziness, dude, I just wanted to apologize and just say, "Hey, man, I'm sorry.
No, no,
I cannot believe I forgot to add you to the show, man. It's
no,
just there
no
was a
need to
lot of shit going
apologize,
on.
man.
I know you're gonna be cool about it. So
You
I'm
you
not.
had you had an amazing lineup, man, and
mhm.
for me to come on there and sit there and look pretty for half hour or whatever, not interested. Wouldn't have made it any better. Wouldn't have added anything to it. So I enjoyed watching the channel. I watched it almost all day,
Nice,
and
man.
I thought I could not believe the lineup that you had, man. The guests you
Dude,
had.
dude, I can tell you, man. I'll give you some behind the scenes pudding. I'm pretty sure that's never been used as a phrase.
So
Behind the scenes pudding.
before you do that, let me
Yeah,
introduce you to Jeremy.
yeah,
This
please
dude
do.
is a legit researcher, investigator. Guy's been looking into the topic since he was, at least 15 years since he was like 2 years old.
Holy cow! All
Getting
right.
on
I'm
off.
31 now. I started doing it when I was
Yeah,
like early
he
high
looks
school.
really young, but yeah,
Yeah,
he's a seasoned a veteran, man, of
like
the
all of us,
UFO.
right? I mean, like all of us, man. We've all been looking at this for at least for me as early as I can remember. But it's nice.
Not
It's nice
me,
to meet
man.
you. Oh
Man,
no, not you, Andrew.
No, I am a noob to this whole stuff, man.
Oh wow. Okay. Dude, I'm sorry. It's been a long day. I'm sure you told me that. I might have
hey, real
forgotten.
quick,
Yeah.
my friend Nick's just walked in, the one that does the UFOs and the Sand Yeti with me.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah, bring him on.
Hey,
What's
what's
up,
Oh
bro?
up?
hey, what's happening, Nick?
Hey,
Good to
what's
meet
going
you,
on?
man. You guys do some awesome
Good.
work. You and Jeremy, you guys do some
Yeah,
awesome work.
yeah, it's really good. It's
He told me
amazing.
about that Sand
Get
Yeti.
in here,
That is
Ted.
amazing.
Get in here. I was telling my brothers here too. Actually, they were of all things. They were having a beer on the porch while I was talking.
Right on.
How you doing? What's your brother's name?
It's
Jeremy?
Tim, or Nick and Tim.
Got it. Tim's the brother. Nick is the
Yeah, I was telling them we
fellow
found the
investigator.
detailed footprints and everything.
Yeah.
I wasn't there for that on Frenchman Mountain because
There's
you're
a
both local, right?
there's a Sasquatch in Nevada, man, that I never knew about.
yeah.
Just learned
Is
about it
is
today.
honestly, I came into the stream super late. I was just like, "Oh my god, Andrew, let me go watch his show, man. I want to give him some love because I forgot to bring him to the
I
big phone
appreciate
home."
that, bro.
And I was like, "Oh, they're talking about Bigfoot." I don't know much about Bigfoot, but I'm bummed now that I kind of missed the
Yeah, we're
stream.
putting a documentary out
Yeah.
in about, I'd say, a month or two is what we're aiming for.
Yeah,
And it's going to be a free documentary we're putting out on YouTube about the Bigfoot in Nevada.
yeah. Well, dude, let me know. I'd like to check it out.
Yeah,
I got a question, Bigfoot question.
Sure. Yeah.
Not to knock the Bigfoot, again, completely missed the conversation, but why are we digging up bones of these things? Why aren't we finding skeletons?
That's a good question.
Well, okay, so I could elucidate my opinion on Bigfoot. I think that
the
it's
microphone's over here.
I think that it's some kind of
Here, trade me spots real quick.
Okay.
Here, that might be just trade me spots.
All right. So I
There you
think
go.
that it's some kind of paranormal, like a supernatural entity myself.
Possibly interdimensional.
Okay, all right.
Interdimensional because I read the Mothman prophecies, and in that book
Camera's over here.
it talks about how aliens and other paranormal entities might be like interdimensional. And when I was hiking on Frenchman Mountain here in Las Vegas, I would come across, and I have photos of these, it'll be in the documentary, of large footprints of a bipedal animal walking through the desert, and they would start and they would stop. It would just be like
Yeah,
20
I've heard
feet
of this.
track. I'm just throwing a number.
Yeah.
20 feet of tracks would just start and stop, and there would be no visible, there would be a beginning, but then they would just cut off. There'd be no end. It just
Yeah.
disappeared.
Well, that's a hell of an answer. That'd be a damn good answer if that's accurate, as to why we're not finding as far, fossil records.
Yeah.
But I have heard, and I haven't delved too much into it, but there is a theory out there that with UFO sightings, an uptick in Bigfoot sightings also happens. I don't know a lot of research into that, but what can you guys shed on that?
Well, yeah, it does talk about that in the Mothman prophecies. When the Mothman was being sighted in Point Pleasant, West Virginia, there was an uptick in UFO sightings and other paranormal phenomena, ghosts, poltergeists, that kind of thing. So we might be looking at, again, some sort of an interdimensional phenomena where creatures from, or I don't even want to call them, whatever, entities from another dimension or parallel universe are crossing over into our own.
This is something that is covered in Skinwalker Ranch a little bit, Lou.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The relationship between the Bigfoot and the UFOs doesn't necessarily mean that they're one and the same thing,
Right.
Yes.
but
Definitely.
there could be a relationship to the location where these things can cross over into this dimension. Now, this is speculation, right? There's no evidence to
Yeah.
support this. There's witness testimony, and maybe some other type of evidence that maybe Brandon Fugel, who was on Lou's stream today. You guys know who Brandon
Wow.
Fugel is, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
The new owner of Skinwalker Ranch. He was on Lou's live stream today, along with Jeremy Corbell. I mean,
It was a
when I said
murder.
this dude
Man,
had
it
a
was
lineup
crazy.
today, it was
It was crazy.
crazy. But that
Yeah.
said, that there is a connection between UFOs and the Bigfoot, and other paranormal activity too, ghosts even.
Are you guys both local, by the way, like in Vegas or
I'm
Luis is
in Los
LA.
Angeles. Yeah.
Los Angeles?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. How often do you guys come across tracks?
1 second, my cat's literally on the.
Oh, no.
Oh man, I thought you were bringing
Yeah,
up
they
a
are.
cast.
I thought that was a cast too. I'm
That's
like,
exactly
Jesus,
what I
dude, what are
thought.
the odds that he whips out a
Right.
cast when I ask about how many times you guys come across, prints? But is this often? Are you guys coming across prints a lot?
I was telling him we saw him quite a few over in the Spring Mountains. I just told him about the Mount Charleston one.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go find a print real quick in the other room that we cast from the
Yeah,
Spring
please do.
Mountains.
Yeah, let's
Please,
check that out.
yeah.
Hey, have you guys seen? I have a feeling I'm getting the name of the filmmaker incorrect, but I think it's David Paulides, and he does Paulides, and he does the Missing 411 series.
I've heard of that. Yeah.
Oh
I haven't seen it in a
man,
while, though, yeah.
dude, if you haven't seen it or you haven't seen it in a while, I'd say go back and revisit that because
Okay, yeah, definitely.
that is something that it sort of plays into what we were talking about before, where these things are being somehow able to pop in and out of literal existence. Where you hear about, and I love this story that he talks about in the movie. But a group of hunters, one in particular who was a hunter for badass.
I don't know if you could see it on there. I probably should have brought this out earlier. It's an actual footprint.
Yep.
Oh,
That
wicked!
thing's huge, man.
Yeah, man. It's.
I don't know if you could see. It's.
You guys want to hear a funny story? I literally just watched the movie Harry and the Hendersons for just pure nostalgia reasons. I played it for my. She'd never seen it, and she's like, "What the hell are we watching?" I'm like, "This movie is weird, dude. It is a lot weirder than I remember, but it still holds up."
It does.
Andrew
it
mentioned
is.
something called the Big Phone Home. Have him tell you about that because I think that's something that we could get involved with.
Yeah,
that's
definitely. Big phone home. That's
yeah.
what Lou's disclosure movement that he was doing. Go ahead, talk a little bit about that, Lou.
Yeah, so we had a big gathering of a whole bunch of people trying to unite everyone on the common ground of asking and requesting for more data and information when it comes to the UAP topic. I mean, that's as short as I could put it, but the idea was to get journalists, former military officials, podcasters, YouTubers, celebrities, influencers, anyone who has an interest in the topic to come on the show and really put the topic in a way where it is digestible for the senators and congressmen that were trying to take this this topic seriously. And I think we did a really good job today
That
at
was exceptional, Lou.
at controlling the narrative.
Jimmy Church showed up, unannounced. Richard Dolan dropped in for 20 minutes or so, impromptu.
It was insane.
This live stream was on fire today.
I could tell you the Richard, that was a cool little happening of events. I saw Jimmy Church in the chat. I was like, Jimmy, I've been trying to get in touch with you. If you want, join us. He's like, email me. So I went crazy trying to find the guy's email. And then I
He
finally
posted
found
it
it.
right there in
He
the
did
chat
post
too,
it, but it
man.
was the chat was just,
The
it was
chat was spinning
moving.
by, man.
And so it was hard to see it, but I finally got it, and then I got his ass in there, and then Christina had hit me up, and she's like, "Hey, I think I could get Richard Dolan on." I'm like, "Do it, do it."
Yeah.
So we got Dolan on there, and Jimmy Church, and yeah, man, we had a lot of killer conversations. I think the thing I'm most proud of is that the variety of opinions and belief systems that people brought to this, and Jeremy Reese put it best: it's a trough in the jungle, a water bowl where everybody can drink from, and we all came to the water, and we all drank from the same source, the same river, whatever you want to call it. We all came together, and nobody ate each other, nobody threw mud, nobody was being a jerk. It was all, where can we agree? Where's the common ground? Let's talk about that. Let's focus on that. I tried real hard to make sure that nobody was trying to say they had the answers. We didn't. There's a couple guys that sort of got there. I know what's going on. But outside of those two little small things, and even I think in both cases, when they said, I know what's going on, they really articulated themselves in a really nice way where it was like, fuck, I really don't want to argue against this because shit, you're making a lot of sense. But unfortunately, we cannot say that to a senator. It's just, I can't say that to a senator because they're going to hang up the phone. The aide I'm talking to is going to hang up the phone. And so, that's the message that we really tried to just hammer home. And I think, not that toot my own horn, but beep beep, I think we did it.
We did it, or you did it, man.
We did it. We all did it. This is an us effort. I can't do this shit by myself. I could talk till I'm blue in the face, but
it was a huge collaboration
I was
between
telling
everybody
Andrew,
that was there.
Yeah.
What's
If
that?
Andrew wanted to go skywatching or something, I said we'd take him with us.
Yeah.
Oh
I told
yeah,
him
absolutely.
other things other than UFOs too. He was interested
I've
in
been
Sand
sky
Yeti.
watching up to Area 51.
Yeah.
Went up there and did some night photography. Area 51, the black mailbox.
oh yeah,
Well, then I know a guy that used to work at a place called Area 28, which is next to Area 51. You can't find it on Google. This guy had a top secret clearance in the government. And he said that him and his buddies used to go up on a hill out there, bring out lawn chairs, drink beers, and watch experimental aircraft.
wow. Yeah, I mean, that story sounds familiar. That's got a familiar ring to it. I've never heard of Area 28. That's interesting. I've been out there, but the lady and I went when we went to Vegas. I'm like, babe, can we go around Area 51 on the way back home? I mean, this is like 6 hours out of the way. It's really not necessary to go that way, but I'd never done it. And, we went out there during the day. We went to the Little Alien, talked to the whole lot of, no, it's beautiful, dude. I love. I mean, there was a point where I literally slowed the car down to about 10 miles an hour, or was just idling down the road, and I just looked out the window for 10-15 minutes without seeing a car. Like, coming from LA, that's just a welcome experience. You don't get a lot of that out here. You really got to go out of your way to get that.
Yeah, we were driving actually out towards a ghost town called Taibo, which is a little bit out of Rachel. It's north of Rachel. And while we were driving on the freeway there, we saw a pair of lights coming towards us. And we're like, who the heck's out here? It was probably like 1 a.m. or something. And we were driving in that direction, and the terrain is somewhat hilly out there. So we went down a hill. We came out of the dip. The lights disappeared.
Cool.
We looked, and while we were driving, we were looking for another car parked on the side of the road. We were looking for perhaps a dirt road going off. There was nothing.
Yeah.
It was just a straightaway. The lights coming towards us, they were coming, and they disappeared.
Yeah.
Wow. There's some weird stuff that goes on out there.
Yeah.
I didn't see anything weird other than startling. I saw Starlink, the satellite chain.
Man, everybody says they've seen this. I'm dying to see it because
It's
it's
wild.
apparently it's pretty
It's
easy to
wild.
see.
I
Yeah.
was telling them White Pine County, where we do a lot of our UFO stuff.
Yeah.
Don't we have some gnarly stories about
Oh,
cars
yeah.
chasing lights, chasing
Oh,
cars?
Yeah.
with a bunch
UFOs
of-
chasing cars.
like in my opinion, there was a really bad idea. I was speaking for at MUFON a couple days ago. There was a pair of hunters that were out hunting out by Baker, Nevada, and they were hunting and they saw a light like at treetop level in the woods, like on the other side of the valley traveling. One guy gets this bright idea to take the spotlight for deer hunting and shines it at this light. And he said he blinked, and when his eyes opened, the object was like right in front of him, like across the valley. And
Wow.
he says the object shined a blue beam of light at him. And he says it scared them so bad they dropped their guns and left their camp, their hunting site, got in the truck, and were going over 100 miles an hour, trying to get away from this light. And they were pouring sweat, and like I think one guy literally peed his pants. And they drove all the way to Ely, like almost like an hour and a half away, because this guy had this bright idea to shine a spotlight at this light across the
Wow.
valley.
Not a great idea.
Well, but then again, we also may or may not have been known to do that.
Yeah, and then
too.
we may or may not have tried to do that. So we
I
can't
like
say very much
the
here. Yeah,
the
actually,
non-answer
We
answer.
went out there about a year after it happened, and then we saw a light in the valley.
We actually
And
did.
Nick actually did shine a light at it. But
Yeah.
We had video evidence on that.
yeah.
Yeah, we
Wow.
saw some weird stuff in the same location too.
That's crazy. Yeah, well, like I said, I'm gonna have to have you guys back on, and maybe we could do like all three of you guys, and we could do
Yeah,
some
for sure.
Definitely.
We all three live really close to each other,
Yeah.
so
cool.
I just figured while they were over, they just happened to be over here. They were outside like doing something while I was doing the interview, so I figured I'd have them come in and say hi real quick.
I appreciate that, man, and
we're having a few
Jeremy, I
beers
appreciate you
outside,
sharing.
Yeah, those
What's
two were
that?
having a few beers. I was just drinking water, talking to you guys.
Oh, right on. Well, it's Saturday, man. You have a beer or two. But yeah, I'm gonna close this out. I know Luis is probably dead on his
No,
feet
sorry
right
guys.
now.
No. Actually, weirdly enough, I actually feel pretty good. We ordered a pizza, so my girl went to go grab it, and that was the pizza guy calling.
Oh, okay, cool. No, I figured 4 hours sleep, that's 48 hours, and you've been going at it for
But you
months
have
on
pizza
end
now,
to get this
Yeah,
thing
but
up
now
and
you're
running.
tired with pizza.
With pizza,
Yeah, exactly. No,
Normal.
it's. I have a feeling it's probably gonna be lights out once the pizza hits the old lips. But but weirdly enough, man, like if that, I mean, for me anyway, if that doesn't get your blood going and keep you up for a couple extra hours that maybe normally you wouldn't stay up, I don't know if you're living, man.
Yeah, definitely.
I don't know if you're living.
I will
but-
take you guys up on that sky watching invite. And Luis, you ever get out to Vegas, man?
Dude,
you
I
hit
tell
me
you,
up and we'll get together.
I've already got a date with McGowan.
Yeah.
I've promised him. He was the first guy I'd promised, but yes.
If
Definitely,
Luis
yeah.
comes up
Well-
here, is it Luis or Luis?
Lewis. My mother
if-
prefers Luis.
if
I
we
really
ever
don't
get-
have any preference.
If you want to join us on any of these talks we have with Andrew, you're welcome anytime.
Hey man, yeah, no, Andrew is going to be a regular staple on my show. So any friend of Andrew's a friend of mine, and yeah, man, I love Andrew's. I think Andrew's the calmest voice in this field. I haven't heard anything calmer than Andrew. And he's just a cool dude, man. I like good people, and Andrew's good people.
Thank you, man.
Yeah.
Much appreciated, Lou. And same to you, brother.
Hey.
I feel the same about you. Although not the calm part. You're a ball of energy, man.
Yeah,
You're like a Tesla coil.
Yeah, man. Well, you're trying to get people. You could try. Hey, man. Everybody loves a motivational speaker. It inspires. Nobody wants to fucking sit there and be talked at. There's a difference between talking to people versus talking at people, and relating with people, and so that's sort of. I mean, I don't know if that's a philosophy that I take when I talk to people. I'm just an excitable dude. I'm just, I've always been a ball of energy, so
it comes across really pleasant, man. It's not obnoxious or annoying. Like, I've been in
Give
the
it a couple.
presence of
Give it a
people.
couple years. Give it a couple years.
You going to
Right.
the symposium in August?
The one in Laughlin.
The MUFON symposium, the one.
Oh, the MUFON Symposium in Vegas.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think I'm gonna. I think I'm gonna end up going to that.
yeah. Tim actually
Yeah,
works there.
yeah,
Actually.
no joke. Every
Here,
year
get
they.
over here. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, seriously. Every year they have it at my work, and I go on my lunch break. I just go out there and chill with all the people, and I read Travis Walton,
Nice.
Oh,
all
right
the
on.
other paranormal people. It's awesome.
Oh, that is cool. I mean, yeah, I would love, man. I've never been to a UFO conference.
Oh,
I've
it's
Neither
never,
have I.
crazy.
I've never been to a Skywatch with folks like those. These are things that I'm hoping in the next year, those doors start becoming a little bit more open for me. You know, as I now am head first in this topic. I mean, I there's no turning back now. I'm in it. So
Well, you guys have to go. It's crazy. Like you just go there. You don't even go to try to talk to people, and people are like, "Hey, by the way, do you live here?" And you're like, "Oh yeah, I saw a UFO here." And just next thing you know, you're like, "I'm part of the paranormal team." Blah, blah. And meanwhile, I'm dressed in my work clothes. You know.
yeah, love it.
Lady gave you a crystal to attract aliens. or
Yeah, some
something?
lady gave me a crystal right out of nowhere. She's like, "Do you believe in this stuff?" Yeah, here's a crystal that supposedly attracts like interdimensional beings. It's in my loft area at my house right now.
Does it work?
Not yet.
Well,
Yeah,
maybe on the
put the
next
mojo on that
I was
thing.
gonna say maybe on the next Bigfoot trip you should bring it along.
Yeah, I should. Yeah, bring it. Yeah,
That couldn't hurt, right?
Right. We've seen ghosts and UFOs. May as well see an interdimensional being too.
Oh yeah,
Hey,
man.
one thing I wanted to tell you, Lou, is
Yeah.
the stream was so successful today. You set the bar so high, dude. I don't know how you're going to top it next year.
Oh, it's
You-
only
you-
there's
Your
only
work is ahead of you, man.
there's no way we won't top it next year.
Oh, that's a good attitude.
Like,
You're
dude,
such a good attitude.
like, dude, there's no way. Like, there's just no way. This conversation, I just tell you, we had a lot of people within our government watching that stream.
Awesome.
And they want to know what people are thinking about this. They're curious to know what I think the constant theme of the day was lack of trust in our government.
Yeah.
Over and over and over again about how people don't trust the government, if they believe it's a psyops, and it's so glaring. All these politicians need to do is give a little bit of rope on this topic, and it would buy them so much credibility. It would buy them so much trust. Like they're really, and I think that's what Marco Rubio's doing, because I don't know how you guys lean politically, but let's just say you are a very left-leaning political person that can't stand Marco Rubio, but you really like the topic.
Mm-hmm.
And Marco Rubio starts spitting the stuff he's spitting. I don't know about you. I'm not a big fan about Marco Rubio's politics. There's some things I do like. Most things I find him kind of obnoxious.
Mm-hmm.
But he's articulate. He's a very, very good politician, whether you like to admit it or not. And he moves the dial. And if that means I've got to suck it up a little bit and put my personal shit to the side on Marco Rubio, so be it. That's what I'm going to do. If that means I'm going to get more data and more information, perfect. So that's the attitude we got to take, man. So, I mean, dude, there's no way this gets smaller. This conversation is only going to grow from here. I promise you.
And not to interrupt you guys, but did Jeremy tell you about his Jeremy's the only person in history he has the balls to call an Air Force base and demand to know about UFO stuff? Did he tell you about that?
No,
but that's the kind of voice we
military
need
calling
in
our
the
freaking
big
home
phone
lines
home,
and
man.
stuff.
For sure.
Three different bases calling. They show up at the house with Jeremy.
Yeah, see, that's where you get into some issues. Like, I think that's hilarious. I wouldn't tell 3,000 people to go do that because that doesn't win us any friends, within the conversation. Like if you're wasting people's time, it's a dangerous game you're playing. But if you're talking about one guy in the state making a couple of phone calls to an Air Force base. You know, I think that's hilarious. I think I love
I
it.
was at work and I'm getting all these texts. Oh my God, there's men in black in front of the house, and I'm like, you know, in between like customers at work. I work in customer service. I'm like looking
That's
at my phone, like,
tenacity,
what the hell's
man.
going
And
on? And next thing I know, they're getting pictures of like vans and
Love it.
When this event occurred, I was on the other side of the country in Cleveland, Ohio, and I was getting calls from military people asking me stuff.
just because you know this guy.
Yeah, I called Jeremy up, and I was living in,
And you even knew you knew what they wanted.
and I knew what they wanted, but I kept my mouth shut. And I'm like, "Are we gonna be like taken away in zip ties?"
No kidding, man.
It's funny.
Wow.
My stepdad was a cop, and he, you know, of course, there was always like cop things laying around, and one of the things were zip ties. And one day, my brother and his best friend decided to be funny to tie me up in some zip ties, and that was a good day.
Always a good day to get tied up in zip ties, right?
Oh
That
man,
was sarcasm, man.
yeah,
Awesome.
yeah, definitely not.
Well, Lou, with that, man, I'm gonna say huge congrats to you on
Thanks,
the
dude.
effort, the payoff to the effort that you put forth, man. You know, props, big time.
Hey, dude, appreciate it, man. You know, folks like you inspire me, man. You know, and hopefully you inspire people to do the same. That's the whole idea, you know.
Well, here's
Pass
three
it along.
guys that are going to be on next year's. I guarantee with the presentation that Jeremy has about crashed UFOs.
Yeah,
incredible, man.
Well, I can tell you, next year we're playing around with. We're already planning for next year, but it can't be one day. That's clear. It just doesn't fit in a one day. There's so many people that want to get in on this conversation. So yeah, it would be cool if, you know, we set up a day. I would love a theory day, you know, where people come in and they bring their best theories, their best research, their best data points, and maybe we could pick the best ones and pass those along to you know, universities or, you know, whatever organizations that will look at the data and decipher whether or not it's valid and or valuable and worth pursuing.
This guy doesn't rest, man. I mean, the stream just ended. Three or 4 months in the making to put that to organize that.
60 days, basically.
You're already looking at next year, and you got a year to plan this time. So it's going to be.
That's
awesome.
what I'm saying. It's not going to be smaller. There's no chance.
One question I had is, it seemed like the panels that you had, like it seemed like you broke it up into panels. Did you intentionally put those people together? Or did it
in the murderer's row? Yes, I intentionally put all of them together because I was like, this is going to be epic if we can get all these guys in the same spot. When it comes to, like I said, when it comes to Church and Dolan, that was just the topic was trending, and they were getting messages from their fans and their people going, Church, you've seen this, you know what's going on. And you know, so it was awesome. It was awesome. You know, like that's exactly what I wanted to happen. That's exactly what I wanted to happen. If I had one wish, I wish had been able to get James Fox.
Yeah.
I tried everything I could in my power to reach out to him and get him to talk to us, because I loved the website. I wanted to learn about the website, how he came up with it. You know, did we inspire him, or was it something that he was already working on and maybe we came in and stole his thunder? You know, like I mean, I don't know how I'm going to steal thunder from James Fox, you know, but like, I mean, maybe we did. Maybe we beat him to the punch and I didn't mean to do it. And but it would have been great to collaborate, because I really, 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 really loved his website. When I saw it, I'm like, shit, that's what I wanted to do. But then I was like, well, you could get angry about it, or you can embrace it and use it.
And you did.
So that's what I did. I just took it and ran. You know, I was like, dude, you're going to make this. You know what? There ain't nothing I'd say I can't use it. And I'm going to try and, you know, promote. That's why I put the hashtag UAP Act now,
Mhm.
because we were using that website. We were telling people about it. And you know, that's the only thing I wish would have happened would be we would have gotten James Fox. That would have been killer.
Well, even if not, even if a single person doesn't even call Congress, which you know is not going to happen, but even if nobody watching that live stream today activates and goes to do something, which you know has already happened anyway,
Mm-hmm.
the one of the biggest wins out of today was you brought people from opposing sides of the UFO topic onto the same platform to
Mm-hmm.
talk about the same thing, and that is more transparency from the government.
Yeah.
That's a
Well,
win. That's a
that's a
huge win, man.
huge win. It's I've already been told that no one's ever done that.
Nobody's ever done that.
Nobody's
Not
ever
on that
done it
scale.
on that level. I mean, you know, there's conferences, and a lot of those conferences, you know, but they're all in separate rooms. Everybody's with their own ideas, agreeing with each other, instead of all coming to the same stage, you know, and all coming to the same, you know, conference room. And that's what I was trying to do. You know, it's like, this isn't about theories. This isn't about, you know, our personal beliefs. This is about what can we all agree on.
Yeah.
And move on that. And so that's, you know, that's the purpose, man. That's the, you know, the whole thing. But what's cool is that, you know, people, like I said, people have been reaching out and they're like, man, what you did today is historic. It hasn't hit me. It hasn't hit me like that. I don't feel like I've done anything, you know, I don't feel like I've done anything really that crazy. If I had, you know, if somebody with twice the resources I had, which is not a lot, they could have done this very, very easily. Like,
But if they didn't have your passion and your
yeah, I
energy,
mean,
it's
yeah,
not going to work.
for sure. It's there's a lot of things. Look, I'm just, I think my acting career might have been preparing me for this moment. And you know, a little bit of a part of me is that's a little bit of a gut punch, because maybe I might not do any acting on the level that I've always dreamed of. Who knows? It can still happen. But if this is what all of that training is sort of built me for, and if this is something that in, you know, 5-10 years I can help really move the dial on, then hey, man, that's you know, that's destiny. I have no control over that, because I could tell you that was never my intention to get into this like I had. You know, I was fine just doing my little UFO channel, talking about movies and TV shows and critiquing those movies and TV shows, because I'm in the production field, and it's turned into something that I never, ever, ever intended it to be. You know, so it's cool. It's really fun to watch. Matt Looney, who co-hosted with me, he's like, dude, this was epic. But I told him, I'm like, I see the code. It's like I'm looking at the Matrix and I can see the code. I see the formula. I see how this conversation is really going to take some leaps and bounds, and I can see how I can help facilitate that. It's not hard. It's really easy. But you know, you're going to be part of that vision, Andrew. Part of the chat room that I started is that vision coming together. And this is going to be an all hands on deck effort. Everyone's going to be invited. Everyone's going to be involved. Of course, I'm going to have my select, like, close crew of cool people that I always refer to, you know, but I'm building, I'm trying, I see, like I said, I'm building something. I'm working on it. Like, I'm so excited. This day has opened my eyes. So yeah, dude, I'm rambling. I gotta stop. I'm gonna go eat some pizza.
No, yeah, appreciate you coming on, Lou. I'll let you get to it. I mean, just tell people how they reach out to you. Anybody who's
man. For everyone in the chat, first of all, if you're watching this and you haven't subscribed to Andrew's channel, do that. What the hell are you waiting for? Hit the bell. give him a like. It helps with the algorithm. He's a new channel. He's doing it a different way. I really enjoy the way you're doing it. So show Andrew your love. That's first and foremost. If you want to find me, please do it. I'm at Los Angeles. I'm in Los Angeles. My Twitter handle is Lou Angeles, Lu Angeles. My YouTube channel is the Unidentified Celebrity Review. If you hashtag Big Phone Home, you will find me because we got it trending. So that's a lot of fun. Check out our website. Just because
if dropped in, man.
Oh hell yeah, and he's still fucking
up,
going.
Mike?
You goddamn right I am, man. I'm building an empire here.
Right on.
We damn it, he threw me off my thought.
Sorry about that. Thanks.
No,
for
that's okay.
in,
Damn you, Michael. No, I damn, what the hell was I saying, dude?
You were talking about your empire.
Oh yeah, well, yeah. I'm definitely going to talk about my empire. Okay. Yeah. My channel, the Unidentified Celebrity Review. Yeah, just come join us. You're going to see Andrew on my channel a lot. So and vice versa. So this is going to be a really, really cool journey, man. You're not going to want to miss this. So subscribe. And Jeremy and the boys over there. I'm sorry I didn't get all the catch all of the Bigfoot info, but I am fascinated about Bigfoot. I remember, it was in the library. It was first UFOs, and then the very next thing was Bigfoot. I've always had a fascination with Bigfoot.
If you need, if you want any kind of like a speaking thing, or you want me to help you with your UFO thing, I'll help you with that. By the way, if you're looking for people that have cool stories and all that. Yeah.
I mean, we're always looking to have cool conversations. So, but I'm interested in the documentary. Send it to me when it's done.
Okay,
I'd like to check it out, and just for fair warning, I'll give you my real opinion. But I won't do it publicly.
That's how his channel started. He did reviews on movies.
I'll give you my real opinion. I'll give you guys, if I think there's places I think it could be improved, I'll tell you. I won't bullshit you. I'm not gonna pump smoke up your ass. The point is, let's be as best as we can be, so that way we can present the information as best we can. So before you release it, run it by me, dude. I'd love to check it out, give you some notes, and see just make sure
he's an actor. He is an actor. So
hey, I'm a producer, I'm a writer, I'm a director, I'm an award-winning filmmaker. Well, I'm an official selection in a film festival this year.
Though.
So
awesome, man.
Yeah, that's fun. Anyway, all right, man. I'm gonna let you guys go. I am fucking rambling. Michael's already yelling at me because he's probably jelly he's not in here.
Yeah,
all right, guys.
We're gonna close it out anyway. It's getting late.
Yeah, well, it's nice meeting you guys. I'm gonna let you close it out, Andrew, and I'll see you very soon, dude.
Good deal. Take care, dude. Have a good night, brother.
Yep,
have a good one.
Yeah.
All right, gentlemen. So with that, great show, great story, Jeremy. Thank you for sharing all that knowledge. You did give people your channels. Go ahead and give it to them again in case.
The main one to contact me is EliUFOcrash.com. If you want to look into the Bigfoot things that we do, our website is bigfootspad.com, but that's also linked onto my UFO website as well, though.
And you have a Facebook page?
Yep. That's all linked on there too.
Okay. All right, cool. And we're going to see you on Twitter pretty soon.
You'll see me on Twitter just real soon. I'll have to make another appearance on the show because we have like a lot more things we could talk about.
Definitely.
Like Bigfoot and then the other UFO things in Nevada.
Definitely.
So I'm sure I'll be back on. I'll see if I could get them on with me next time.
That'd be cool. Yeah. We'll do that. We'll make that a couple weeks out. I have another open Saturday, I think, in a couple weeks.
Okay. Just let me know.
On Saturday.
I'll ask them what's going on. We should be able to set something up.
Right on. Good deal. And then, as we talked about, man, I'll go out and do some sky watching with you guys.
Okay. And don't forget to check your emails, by the way. I know you already kind of looked at it, but
yeah, I don't want to do that on live stream anymore, man, and making people jealous. All right, brother. Well, it's good talking to you, Jeremy.
All right.
You guys have a good night,
one, Andrew. We'll stay in touch.
All right.